order, and I will move adoption of the agenda. Second by Juan. Let's open that vote. And we're joined by Mary Norwood.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it, and I will move approval of the minutes of the prior meeting. Second by Juan. Let's open that vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, minutes have been adopted. That takes us to our next item of business, which is the election of the 2025 FEC Vice Chair. I will open the nominations, and I will nominate Mr. Juan. Second by Mr. Winston, and we're being joined by Ms. Bakhtiari, Ms. Overstreet, and the Council President. So we have a first and a second. Are there any other nominees? Not seeing anyone. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, Mr. Juan, congratulations on this dubious honor. That takes us to the dreaded Finance Executive Committee goals and objectives. Committee members, you have been, as a starter conversation item, you've been copied on last year, not only on last year's goals and objectives, but where we ended up in terms of the scorecard. So that might be a good starting place for you to, fashion your recommendations for this year. And we're not going to, settle on that today, but please put your thinking caps on. And now it is time for public comment. And do we have a list? First up is Mr. Skylar Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask my time be paused. I would like for the council members to have a handout.
You can go ahead and start anytime.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what you all are receiving, Councilmember Overstreet, over there is a letter from Isabel Mercedes Cummings, who was on the task force that created this Office of Inspector General. It's an a LinkedIn post where she is condemning the actions that you were about to take today, modifying the powers and the responsibilities of the Inspector General. I will also note similar expressions have been made by Rose Gilharn, the former commissioner that was also one of the mothers of this office, of the Commissioner of the Department of Investigations, or the IG of New York City, the IG of Philadelphia. Also, I will now proceed to read a letter from the Association of Inspectors Generals, which you all have. The very first item, I wish that everyone would pay attention because this is very important. Removing the term corruption from the OIG scope of authority altogether and replacing it with an even higher threshold of wrongdoing is simply unacceptable. That's unheard of. It's sinful, and it's a shame that you even put your name on such a piece of legislation. Second of all, appointment of the OIG's governing board would come under the mayor's authority. No one is disputing this. I know there's amendments floating around. I hope they will change this, but I ask is that you hold this because, of course, this is why this office was created as a model, because it's independent. The IG would be hampered from sitter records and would become more difficult to obtain if investigations were to be had, because they have to ask politely and say, "Mother, may I have your city taxpayer cell phone? And by the way, please don't clear the data on the phone." I mean, that's unreasonable. If someone from the city asks to see your cell phone, what's the first thing you're gonna do? You're gonna clear it. So why are we not giving her the same level of access that our city auditor has? Why are we weakening that? You're also striking corruption completely from her scope. I want to read something from a letter that you guys received from the same Association of Inspectors General 2 weeks ago. The appearance and facade of good ethical government is worse than the very absence of good ethical government. And I will end briefly because this is simply unacceptable legislation as is with this. You have plenty of employees behind me. I worked for the city for 10 years, by the way. I've been one of you. I want you to know there are several employees this office have cleared of misconduct and wrongdoing, and that's lost in this conversation. We're hearing from unions and people that are professional agitators in some cases, not all of them. I always say the people that make the news are not the people, which is 99% of the people in this city that get up every day and do extraordinary work for the people of Atlanta. They don't make the news, they don't make the headlines, but what is lost is that this office has cleared people of wrongdoing, and they've came and they've testified. And not only that, the road that leads us here is simply unbelievable. The process that established this office was long, robust. We heard from, as I said, the post that you all have, Isabel Mercedes Cumming from Baltimore, the Inspector General of New York City, the Inspector General of Philadelphia, and we're erasing all this progress for a task force that held 3 public hearings.
And I apologize for interrupting. Normally, there's a bell that, lets you know when you're within 30 seconds and when the time's up, and evidently we don't have that function today. Okay, so I will ask people to stick to the 3-minute time limit, so that we can be fair and consistent here.
Yes, sorry, just ask that you hold. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. First name, I can't read. Last name, Thornhill, followed by Carlton Ham.
Hello, my name is Jamia. About 10,000 employees serve the city of Atlanta every day. I'm one of them. We pick up trash, clear roads, keep drinking water safe, clean planes, put out fires, and keep the city running, sometimes in snowstorms. We show our commitment, hard work, and support of Atlanta every day. So all of this stuff just don't make sense. The process for investigations that has been talked about leaves employees without rights, no representation, and no protections. We work too hard for that. That's just wrong, and it messes with the trust of employees who serve our city. Employees deserve to be treated fairly. This is not about politics, it's about trust and respect for the workforce. The current process is reckless, and if you don't change it, you're gonna hurt the people who put their life on the line for the city every day. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Carlton Ham, followed by Zachary Williams.
I'd like to yield my time to Crystal.
And I'm sorry, we don't yield time in this committee, so you're welcome to take your time if you'd like. Zachary Williams, followed by Crystal Jeffrey. Yeah, and I'm sorry, longtime observers of this committee know that we can't donate time here, but you're welcome to take your time if you'd like. Okay, we're going to hear from the prior listed speaker then.
He's not saying anything. You can go to the next.
Okay, so Ms. Jeffrey then.
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I am Crystal Jeffrey, Secretary-Treasurer of AFSCME. As a union leader committed to the protection and well-being of City of Atlanta employees, I strongly urge this committee to uphold the task force recommendations. These proposals strike a necessary balance between ensuring accountability and safeguarding employee rights. Full transparency in OIG and Ethics Office investigations is not merely a procedural improvement, but a fundamental pillar of trust and fairness in public service. The recommendations provide clear, actionable guidelines for ensuring that employees are informed, respected, and protected throughout investigative processes. Key elements such as the right to union representation, non-coercive interview tactics, and the assurance that statements made during investigations will not lead to punitive consequences are essential to fostering an environment where employees can cooperate without fear. Furthermore, formalizing these rights and obligations through onboarding, ongoing training, and publicly accessible guidelines demonstrates a forward-thinking commitment to fairness and integrity. Upholding these recommendations is a step forward toward protecting employees and a critical measure for strengthening the credibility of city governance. We will also request the administration to develop a comprehensive guideline detailing employees' rights and proper procedures for interacting with the OIG and ethics officer. This guide should be made available during onboarding, training sessions, and online, ensuring employees are fully informed and supported. On behalf of the workforce and our union members, I respectfully request that this committee approve and implement the task force thoughtful and well-reasoned recommendations. Together, we can ensure a just and equitable system that serves the city and its employees' best interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian McCann, followed by Dewan Robinson, followed by James Martin.
Good afternoon. My name is Ian McCann, and I'm a resident of the Ormwood Park neighborhood in District 1. I'm speaking in opposition to the changes being proposed to the Office of Inspector General, not in their entirety. It's reasonable for an office to change as it matures past its infancy, but many of the changes proposed in the legislation are downright detrimental to the pursuit of government accountability and transparency. And I don't just say that as a concerned citizen. I work in the industry. For 18 years, I've worked across the street at the Capitol as a performance auditor for the state. And in fact, I'm a certified fraud examiner and a certified government auditing professional. So I know a thing or two about government accountability. And because I only have a short time, I'm going to highlight just some of the most egregious proposed changes that I take issue with which I believe undermine the underlying principles of independence, voluntary cooperation, and timeliness of access to information. Specifically, the changes to Section 104B regarding the nomination process of the board members would put too much power in the very office that the OIG would be expected to investigate. The current nomination process gives civic and professional organizations the power to restrict the mayor's appointments. The changes to sections 101E7B would consider all interviews compelled without first allowing them to be voluntary. And quite frankly, I don't know how I do my own job without being able to freely perform background interviews with key support staff. Having subpoena power is nice as a nice tool to have, but it's almost never as effective as just picking up the phone and telling someone's boss that their employees aren't cooperating with the government compliance folks. In my experience, that tends to light a fire under people much more quickly. In short, there's a lot more tools available that don't need to be codified. But this forces every aspect of the OIG's work into an adversarial role instead of a government improvement role. Lastly, the removal of immediate access from Section 101E and that all requests be in writing restricts the timeliness in which OIG staff can effectively do their jobs. If your intent is to ensure records are provided to the OIG staff without delay, then at least use industry standard language of full and unrestricted access. Thank you. And not cross-reference to internal policy, which could be dictated by an outside office and changed at any time. Thank you for your time.
So you have 20 more seconds. By the way, the first bell lets you know you have 30 seconds left.
I understand. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Dewan Robinson.
First, before my time started, I would like, to have the same 30 seconds the gentleman went over, and I would like to acknowledge that today is actually Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday as we sit in the city of our greatest human civil rights leader. So can I give 5 seconds of happy birthday to our beloved brother, Dr. Martin Luther King. How did we get here? We got here because council initiated the OIG because there was alleged corruption going on in Mayor Reid administration, and we didn't care how we got OIG here. We created it. We didn't go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and we are here now, and we are having all these difficult conversations around the OIG office. And it's fitting that today is Dr. King's birthday because I get so many employees that have called me saying, you have not spoken up for us, saying this and that. You speak to ethics and all this and that. And Ms. Moore and I have chatted about this is the first time since she been elected, that we are on the same side of speaking on some things about this and trying to get to a resolution. And Mayor Overstreet, what I will say is, from the employees' concern, I am kind of concerned in a sense because I had two friends that were in the news, got drugged, in the news. Not saying the OIG put them in the news, but the report made the news come to them. And they were later found that there were no findings, but they were fired, their reputation is gone. Everybody looking at them as if they're thieves and they're corrupt, right? In Atlanta, we're used to the feds dealing with corruption and the state and the city. We're not dealing with an OIG office dealing with corruption. That's why I think everybody is so in uproar because we're not used to that in Atlanta. We was not ready for an OIG office in Atlanta when we did it. We wanted to get rid of Mary so bad, but we were not ready for that because certain people just don't want to be investigated, right? But from my standpoint, fight for employees, I do want to know how many investigations have been completed, how many investigations was closed due to unfounded allegations, and how are employees being exonerated. Is the board and council made aware of complete investigations? Why I'm asking for this as me is because I have concern with some people at the airport. I want to know, hey man, where are we with this? What's going on? Like 30 people resigned. We know they would have been fired in a regular world, but they were asked to resign. Where are we at in these findings? So I think there are some legitimate questions that council need to be asking OIG, and we need to be having that honest dialogue. Everybody had that honest dialogue. Where are we at in this process? How many people and how many bank accounts have you gone in subpoena? Like, we need to be able to have those honest dialogue, not in the public, on the news. We need to just be real people and have these real honest dialogue with the OIG office and say, hey, listen, yes, we created this. Yes, we didn't look these things clearly. And it's time to have those conversations, Councilman Shook, and we need to have those offline with council and the OIG office on the second floor because
Thank you.
we got to get to the bottom of this.
Thank you.
All right.
James Martin, followed by Tiffany Roberts, followed by Devin Franklin.
Yes, Jim Martin, 764 Verner Street, Chairman of Neighborhood Planning Unit D. I attended the task force meetings on this topic, and I heard a lot of discussion of the rights of employees needed to be protected. Those rights were generally unstated, but it's obvious from the legislation that has been introduced that rights we're concerned with here are not constitutional rights, but rather the right to destroy evidence, the right to intimidate witnesses, and the right to retaliate against whistleblowers. I'm not sure those are really rights that need to be protected, but perhaps more importantly, the real reason why this legislation has been introduced is to ensure that the Office of the Inspector General only investigates major corruption. Now, that's an ill-defined term, and this legislation is really off base in addressing it because, of course, it impedes her ability to investigate all corruption. It is particularly off base since the City Council has much more effective tools at its disposal to deal with this problem because it can legislate the ethics code for employees. Doing this instead of what is now proposed would provide much needed guidance both for employees and for the public. If, for example, you deem an appropriate, reasonable, and ethical amount for a bribe to be $1,000 for an administrative or legislative action, then enshrining this in the code will ensure that any OIG investigation revealing that one of you has taken a bribe of $900 will guarantee an exoneration. Surely that's better than simply getting away with a crime, or Donald Trump would not be pursuing his legal defenses on the eve of his inauguration as president. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Tiffany Roberts, and then Devin Franklin.
Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Roberts. I'm the Public Policy Director at the Southern Center for Human Rights. We are a 49-year-old nonprofit law firm committed to decriminalizing race and poverty in America's Deep South. I am here providing you with a copy of our policy update since the legislative session started, and we provided that to the General Assembly. But I'm here today, however, on behalf of SCHR to ask that you hold or file proposed ordinance 25-01009. The public, through criminal laws, should not be held to a higher standard than government officials. Where people in our communities are arrested for false information to law enforcement and theft and held in deadly jails, while elected officials and city leadership are shielded from accountability when they lie, cheat, and steal. Gutting the office of the Inspector General would be a return to the days when stewards of the public good went directly to law enforcement and when corruption came to light. There are already state and federal laws applicable to much of this conduct that we're discussing when it comes to corruption. If this legislation passes in its current form, the difference will be that the city will be nearly powerless to root out employees and officials who abuse their power before national scandal ensues. It would be naive to believe that the thousands of people in the city's employ are not aware of abuses and that they do not report them to organizations like ours. Right now, we advise people to either route complaints to the ethics office or to the OIG, but we will not do that if we believe that them reporting it will result in retaliation or worse, ensure even craftier cover-ups. This legislation will invite the FBI back into City Hall in a political climate when you need to hold yourselves to the very highest ethical standards. By making the executive branch the primary decision maker regarding board composition, for example, this legislation would obliterate the separation of powers as it pertains to abuses of the public trust. For people not in the mayor's good graces, perhaps laws and rules do apply to them. But for those who fall in line with what the mayor's or the executive branch demands, they may have license to do whatever they please. By making community organization representation on the board merely discretionary, this legislation would be a continuation of a current pattern of Atlanta shutting out civil society who dare to champion public causes that the administration finds to be inconvenient. We have seen that not even direct service providers like PAD are immune from unethical meddling in procurement processes, dishonest public communications, and so on. As an organization that was on a former mayor's Black Open Records blacklist, everything comes to light, and we know that. Today is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, and I think it's important to note that he was one of us. He was not a politician. LDF, who represented Dr. King, wrote you a letter disfavoring this representation, this legislation. And Southern Center, which was founded in part by Dr. Joseph Eccles Lowry, also opposes this legislation. We ask you to honor the sanctity of this day in charge by rejecting any attempt to undermine the beloved people of Atlanta. Thank you.
Thank you. Devin Franklin, and then Nicola Hines.
Good afternoon, councilpersons, and good afternoon to the viewing public as well. My name is Devin Franklin, and I am Senior Movement Policy Counsel at the Southern Center for Human Rights, located here in the city of Atlanta. I am here today to speak against the proposed ordinance 25-01009, which seeks to strip the Office of the Inspector General of its ability to provide the citizens of Atlanta an invaluable service that has not always been available. That service being truth and transparency in its local government and its dealings and operations. This proposed legislation is bold and not in a good way. It does what is rarely done, which is say the quiet part out loud. Among many other questionable changes, it seeks to remove the investigation of corruption and illegal acts from the purview of the OIG, which is seemingly at least a tacit suggestion, if not an explicit admission of less than ideal ongoings within the walls of the City of Atlanta government, if not actual criminal acts. On behalf of the general public, those folks that fight traffic to work 9 to 5 and beyond, those folks who have created and grown the cultural currency that is Atlanta's cool and its magnetism, and broadly does not have the time to dig into the minutia of its government's actions on a regular basis. Those folks that pay taxes with the implicit understanding that their money will be used to the collective benefit of themselves and their neighbors and not to the personal or political gain of individuals, particularly elected officials who have been gifted the opportunity to sit at the helm of power. This public demands and is owed the transparency and rigorously inquisitive and intentional scrutiny of an office with the time, ability, and authority to ensure such. The impact of this legislation is far-reaching. It impacts every corner of government, particularly those areas where the public's knowledge is guided and informed by its access to information that is made public, where that knowledge can be supplemented through processes such as the Open Records Act. I would like to say that as a policy attorney here in Atlanta, whose team makes frequent use of that process, whose team has recently been thwarted in its usage of the Open Records Act to discern some of the actions of this government, particularly as it relates to procurement processes. I would like to say that we need an office like the OIG that has access to bring truth to light and truth to power. I ask that you all hold and/or file the legislation that you all have before you related to the OIG today and have an opportunity for us to come up with a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicola Hines.
Good afternoon, members of council and fellow citizens. My name is Nicola Hines, and I'm the currently serving as the chair of the governing board of the Office of Inspector General and Ethics Office. As my term comes to an end in 6 months, I want to share my perspective on the proposed changes to the governing board, particularly the removal of the nominating bodies and the new requirement for the role of board chair. For decades, the League of Women Voters of Atlanta Fulton County and the 7 universities have been stakeholders in nominating members to this board. Their involvement has ensured that the board benefits from a diverse range of expertise, civic-minded leadership, and intellectual vigor. These organizations bring more than just names to the table. They bring deep institutional knowledge, independence, and commitment to public service that aligns with the board's mission to oversight and accountability. Removing these trusted entities from the nominating process is not just procedural change. It risks weakening the board's connection to the community and its ability to maintain a board balance and perspective of ethical governance. Similar, the proposed requirement that the nominating from the APAD, Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, cannot be an officer of the neighborhood planning unit, creates a significant barrier. This stipulation would disqualify nearly the entire APAD board, whose members typically uphold an MPU leadership position as part of their qualifications. Enforcing arbitrary thresholds like this for nominating bodies would result in the board being out of compliance or unable to fulfill the board, jeopardizing its ability to fulfill its mandate. At the same time, I understand the desire to ensure the qualified leadership, but I must express concern about proposed requirement that the chair of the governing board be a lawyer with at least 5 years of investigative experience. While expertise in law and investigation is undoubtedly valuable, such a narrow criterion overlooks the many other skills and experience that makes a strong leader. Over my tenure, I've seen firsthand how the strength of this board lies in its diversity of thought, background, and professional expertise. Lawyers, educators, community advocates, and business leaders have all brought unique insights that have been instrumental in carrying out the board's work. Balancing these changes requires careful consideration by removing the LW, Atlanta Fulton, 7 universities, and the thresholds on APAD. We risk losing a system that has ensured impartiality and trust in the board's composition. Adding narrow professional requirements of the chair further compounds this issue by limiting the pool of eligible, capable candidates who could lead with vision and inclusivity. Together, these changes could result in a board that is less connected to the community, less representative of the city's diversity voices, and potentially less independent in its oversight role. As I prepare to sit down, I urge this council to consider the long-term implications of this decision. If the goal is to strengthen the board, let us pursue reforms that encourages inclusivity, independence, and public trust. Removing the voices like the League of Women Voters and our universities will impose rigid criteria for leadership, risk undermining the very principles this board was designed to uphold. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to welcome back to this chamber Ms. Felicia Moore, longtime member of the City Council, and more recently, the president of this body.
Yes, and thank you all. Glad to see you all. And for those members that I haven't had an opportunity to talk to, we haven't reached out, please, let's have a conversation. I want to tell you why I'm here, first of all. I just happened to be watching a council meeting, which I long since got off of the thing of running to my TV at a certain time to see a meeting, realizing, you know what? You're not there anymore. You don't have to watch every meeting. But I saw a meeting where the Inspector General happened to come for public comment, and I said, oh, there's some trouble here. And so I've been intently watching this issue from the beginning. I don't think there's anything that I know that I could have watched that I've missed. And I wanted to be here today waiting to see, I hope I didn't come, I hope I didn't see legislation that would weaken this office. Somebody said out there, you know, you're responsible for this mess. You know, having been one that pushed for an OIG and pushed for the iPro, and with the council and many of you, some of you are still here that did the right thing in getting this going. But transparency, ethics, and accountability has always been a big part of my service. And that's why I'm here, to make sure that as much as I can, I lend my voice to that. It was done because of many reasons. One, for vendors who felt that they were just not even going to work with the city anymore because they didn't feel they had an equal playing field and a fair shake. For the public, who things were happening in the public that they didn't feel that there was an entity or anyone that could really address their concerns. And even for the employees, I thought my office was a therapist's office. I always kept clinics there for employees who had issues, who wanted to report waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption, but had nowhere to go. And so that's why the Inspector General's office became a very important office, amongst the fact that we had just come off of a big corruption scandal. We wanted to keep the FBI and other entities out. So today I'm here asking for you to do a couple of things, because I know procedurally you can do it. Most of you are the authors here on this body, and it is referred to 2 committees. I'm asking that you consider having a work session, a joint work session with you and Committee on Council. I understand you have some amendments. Some of them are getting closer to where people would like to see, but I would like for the public to have an opportunity to hear the accusations or the problems and hear a direct response from the Office of Inspector General, so we can see it both in real time together and make decisions on some of the issues that you're changing, because the public doesn't get it. I've had to try to pick it from different places. So please hold it here. Do not move it forward without recommendation. Hold that joint work session with the Committee on Council and give us, the public, the opportunity to hear how you're going to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Don Pinobi, followed by Ashley Hodges.
Hello, Don Pinobi, Riverside Neighborhood and NPUD. Dustin Hillis is my council member, who I'm very happy to have representing me. And I know I was also on the vice chair of the committee that established this office, and what the mayor has proposed is not what we had in mind. It was not what we had in mind. We knew we were going to have some tweaks, but this is ridiculous what the mayor has proposed, and I'm kind of surprised they would put something out that's kind of outlandish like this. And if we want to do something, let's make it better. And I love what Felicia just said. Let's grind it out. Let's get together, and I'll come and I'll help out in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley Hodges. And then our final speaker who signed up is Stephen Katz.
Good afternoon. I have a quick question for clarity. Am I speaking for public comment?
Yeah.
No, I didn't sign up to speak for public comment. I'm representing the Mayor's Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for our legislation for the KSU donation.
Okay.
So, I'm good? Okay, thanks.
All right, our final speaker then is Stephen Katz.
This legislation gives citizens, employees, and contractors the confidence that the Office of OIG is conducting its affairs in accordance with the rule of law. And it does so without diminishing the power of the OIG to aggressively investigate and deal with waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's really the fundamental question. Are we going to have an OIG that complies with the rule of law, or are we going to have an OIG that can act with impunity? And today is the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King. We can recall the investigative abuse that Dr. King suffered for so many years. It's still going on. A lawsuit by others pending on these investigative abuses. And while we're not talking about anything here like the scale of that, the underlying principle remains the same, is that the people who conduct investigations must do so within the rule of law. And there must be limits. We don't appoint people who can do whatever they want to do whenever they feel like it. And that's the essential question on this legislation. I would urge you to pass this ordinance because it corrects what is wrong with the Office of OIG. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That exhausts the list that was given to me of people who had signed up to speak, so thank you all for coming. What I would recommend we do now is that Mr. Evans sound the captions of our, I guess it's 5 consent items, which we'll take up at our next sitting, and then I would then propose that to respect all the time y'all have donated to this subject, that we first take up item 12 on page 5, which is the proposed IG-related legislation. So, Mr. Evans, could you sound our first reads, please?
Item number 1 is 25-0-1012, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the city of Atlanta to convey approximately 0.767 acres of land or more to the city-owned city-owned property located at 0 Hartwell Road Northwest, Atlanta, Georgia, 30311, Fulton County, in the land lot 239 of District 14, tax parcel identification number listed here, to Georgia Department of Transportation for the purpose of construction, maintenance, and operation of the I-285 at I-20 West Side Interchange Reconstruction and Widening Project, waiving any conflicting provisions of Article 10, Provision 14, Subsection 3 of the Atlanta City Code, and for other purposes. Item number 2 is an 25-0-1013, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the city of Atlanta to convey approximately 2.775 acres of land, more or less, city-owned property located at 0 Hartwell Road Northwest, Atlanta, Georgia, 30311, Fulton County, and land lot 242 of the 14th District, tax parcel identification number listed here, to the Georgia Department of Transportation for the purposes of construction, maintenance, and operation of the I-285 at I-20 West Side Interchange Reconstruction and Widening Project, waiving any conflicting provisions of Article 10, Provision 14, Subsection 3 of the Atlanta City Code, and for other purposes. Number 3, 25-0-1014, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee to amend the fiscal year 2025 general fund budget to increase the funded revenue budget from $853,830,268.00 to $883,830,268.00, and for other purposes. Item number 4, 25-0-1015, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee to amend the ordinance 24-0-1483, adopted by the Atlanta City Council on October 21st, 2024, and approved by the mayor on October 22nd, 2024, to amend the project and award numbers and other purposes. Number 5, 25-0-1028, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to amend the fiscal year water and wastewater 2025 budget in the amount of $443,222,426.34 and related expenses in an amount not to exceed $114,000.00 for the defeasance and redemption of the City of Atlanta Water and Wastewater Renewal Refunding Bond Series 217A 218A, 218B, and 218C, and for other purposes.
Thank you. Those being first reads, we'll take them up at our next sitting. And so now I would like to go straight to the item for which most of you are here today. That is item 12 on page 5. This is 25-0-1009, ordinance by Shook, Overstreet, Norwood, Boone, Bakhtiari, Hillis, and Amos to amend the sections of the charter indicated here, adopted under Home Rule by authority of the Home Rule Act as indicated, amending Part 1, Charter-related laws, Subpart A, Charter, Article 3, Executive, in accordance with the recommendations of the City of Atlanta Temporary Task Force charged with reviewing the processes and procedures of the Office of the Inspector General, the Ethics Office, and the Governing Board of the Office of the Inspector General and the Ethics Office regarding the authority, oversight, and the clarification of respective roles and responsibilities of the OIG and the Ethics Office, and to create separate governing boards for the OIG and the Ethics Office and for other purposes. And that there is a substitute that already exists. It's been widely disseminated. It's been scrutinized, by the media. It's prompted a lot of public comment that's come our way, including a lot of comment from our current Inspector General. The caption I have just read would be a substitute to the substitute, which includes some clarifying language, and I believe includes some language that most people here are going to be more amenable to, certainly than what's in the original substitute. Before we do that, though, I think there's an important process discussion that everyone needs to hear. This is not your usual off-the-rack review and approval process. This is a proposed charter change, and it's one that involves a dual referral. In other words, it's co-owned, in effect, by two committees, not just one. So it's a complicated and elongated process, and I don't expect everyone to understand it at all. And so for that reason, I'm going to ask Ms. Amber Robinson of the Law Department to walk us through those steps.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Amber A. Robinson, City of Atlanta Department of Law. As stated, because this is an amendment to the City of Atlanta Charter, it's governed, the timeline for the adoption thereof is governed by the Georgia Home Rule Act, which states that municipal charters may be amended by ordinance duly adopted at 2 regular consecutive meetings of the municipal governing authority here at the Atlanta City Council, not less than 7, no more than 60 days apart. A notice containing a synopsis of the proposed amendment must be published in an official organ of the county or legal status of the municipal corporation or in a newspaper of general circulation once a week for 3 weeks within a period of 60 days immediately preceding its final adoption. Accordingly, because this paper was read in by as a personal paper during the January 6th meeting of the full City Council, it is now being considered at the January 15th meeting of FEC. If after this meeting, this committee votes to approve the paper, it will then be considered on the January 21st meeting of the Committee on Council. So that is going to be next Tuesday due to the holiday. And if approved by the Committee on Council following its consideration and discussion of the paper, it will be sent to full council later that afternoon on the 21st, where the full council will have an opportunity to read it for the second time and adopt it the first time. Following first adoption by the full Atlanta City Council, the paper will be referred back to this committee, FEC, where it will be considered and discussed during the January 29th meeting of the FEC committee. If at that time it is approved, it will be referred to the February 3rd meeting of the Committee on Council for discussion. If at that meeting, the Committee on Council votes to approve the ordinance, it will be sent to the full council meeting on February 3rd, where the full council will at that time have an opportunity to read the paper for the third time and adopt it for the second time. Following the second adoption, the paper will then be permitted to be sent to the mayor for approval, either by operation of law or by signature, or for veto. So the earliest that this paper could possibly be approved in accordance to schedule is February 3rd.
All right, thank you. So as you can see, there's a very lengthy review process stretching out before us, including multiple stops, multiple opportunities for additional discussion, additional amendments, additional topics to come before us, replete from start to end with opportunity for public comment. All of this will take place in front of the cameras. Mr. Wan.
Yeah, this follows the procedural question, procedural description that Ms. Robinson just outlined. That presumes it stays in its form every single stop. If it changes in any way between those stops, it resets. Is that correct?
No. If it changes in a form substantial enough that the notice as advertised would have to change, then yes, there would be a need for a reset, because the advertisement requirement that I described would not be able to be met. We'll have to start over. However, all amendments or substitutes to a paper do not rise to the level of needing to alter the notice as published, which is in this case the caption. And so long as that does not happen, then the timeline may proceed as I've described it.
Okay, and the reason why I asked that question is because of the suggestion brought up today by public comment about a work session. It is conceivable that this paper could move forward, the substitute. We could still have a work session provided that the work session resulted in insignificant or not significant changes, or fine tuning rather, that the same timeline could prevail. Is that correct? It may not be the optimal situation, but I'm just saying that is a path forward, correct?
It would, of course, depend on the scheduling date of the work session, but within the dates that I laid out between now and February 3rd, it's possible that the work session could be scheduled such that this would not be altered, but this is the closest timeline. Yep. If the paper is held in any of the committees that I described, then the timeline would shift. But if you were to have the work session and not hold the paper, then the timeline would remain as I've stated it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let me ask it a slightly different way. So am I correct that this paper is a living document and it's open to revision as long as said revisions don't require a change in the caption?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, because I think that's a very useful and frankly kind of hard to understand element of how we make charter changes here. So what I'd like to do is walk through explicitly the proposed new changes that form the highlights of this proposed substitute. So Ms. Robinson, are you prepared to lead us through that?
Yes. So the substitute that is before you makes two fairly major substantive changes, and I will just go ahead and describe those. There were concerns discussed regarding the removal of the word corruption from the legislation as proposed, and in the legislation as read in, the word corruption was removed from the description of the purpose and of the Office of the Inspector General, as well as in a section concerning the initiation of an investigation by the Office of the Inspector General. In the substitute, those concerns are attempted to be remedied through restoring the word corruption in the two places where it occurred. Current in the citation to the substitute before you, in section 8-101B and section 8-106B2, the language now provides that it is a purpose of the Office of Inspector General to investigate allegations of waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption, and clarifying language is added such that the substituted section shall read as follows, that a purpose of the Office of the Inspector General shall be for investigations of allegations of waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption, and investigations conducted by the Office of the Inspector General are administrative in nature, and neither the Inspector General nor deputies, assistants, employees, and personnel assigned to the Office of the Inspector General shall have the powers and abilities of law enforcement officers as defined in state law, including the ability to conduct criminal investigations. Thereafter, in section 8-106B2, which concerns the initiation of an investigation by the Compliance Division of the Office of Inspector General, the word corruption is restored such that the Compliance Division of the Office of the Inspector General shall have the authority to initiate and conduct an investigation upon internal determination by the Office of the Inspector General, supported by reasonable articulable suspicion that a matter under the jurisdiction of the Office of the Compliance Division concerning waste, fraud, abuse, or corruption set forth in this article has occurred or is occurring. The other major change in the substitute are to the composition of the boards. There, as known, the proposed legislation would create two separate boards to govern the Office of the Inspector General and the Ethics Office completely separately. And so there are two sections which concern the composition and appointments to the governing boards of each of those offices. In the section that governs the governing board of the Office of the Inspector General, changes were made such that rather than all of the appointments be in accordance with mayoral discretion, with the various community organizations only being able to provide recommendations for inclusion on the board, the ability of community organizations to provide direct nominations to be considered by the mayor and council as is currently has been restored. The mayor and council are given to a nomination to the board each, and the organizations who will be permitted to provide nominations, direct nominations for mayoral and council approval to the board are as follows. The Atlanta Bar Association, the Gate City Bar Association, the Atlanta Business League, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, and the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. In the section concerning the Ethics Board, the same changes have been made from a procedural standpoint. There will be 5 community organizations who have the ability to provide the direct nominations to the board in the manner it is currently operating. The mayor and council will have 1 nomination each, and the community organizations who will have those ability to provide direct nominations shall be the Atlanta Bar Association, the Gate City Bar Association, the Atlanta Fulton County League of Women Voters, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, the full city council, and the mayor.
Okay, so just to clarify, and those changes, by the way, reflect a lot of dialogue between members of council and members of the administration. So the organizations listed, the people they send forward are the people, right? They're not just merely to be considered.
It is required that they receive confirmation by council, and the confirmation has to be through a resolution to permit the mayor to either approve or veto that. So it is required under the Constitution of the state of Georgia that the governing body, which is the council and the mayor, be able to have that ultimate authority over the appointments to the board. But there is no ability for either the council nor the mayor to switch out the names. But the council and the mayor could reject the nominations. But that is the current state of the charter.
And board terms remain the same, correct? They don't change.
The terms remain the same, yes.
Okay, so, and I know there are probably other changes that we're going to consider and make as this process moves forward. Those are the two that are in here now. Now, that is not to say those are the only two things that have been discussed over the last couple of days. And so if my colleagues don't mind, I would like to work through a list of concerns that came to us directly via the IG, because I think they deserve to be, discussed here in some detail in a public setting. And so and I'm working off of her list here. Okay, 1 and 2 are proposed to deal with. Under what she terms access roadblocks, the word immediate is eliminated, and instead employees must provide records according to city internal processes and procedures, quote, without undue delay. And I think we all need to hear a little bit more about what that is proposed to mean. How is what's in the current substitute different?
So currently, it's correct, it does state that the OIG and ethics office are to have immediate access to records of the city of Atlanta. Here, this language is not intended to stymie that, but there is no guidance whatsoever in the current charter that provides as to what that means. So various actors can have different interpretations of what the word immediate means and what process needs to occur in order to grant that. And it's because these disputes may occur and there is no guidance in the charter, this charter makes it, this proposed language makes it clear that in order to receive this records, the Office of Inspector General will go through appropriate processes, which in some cases are spelled out in ordinance or other policies adopted by the city. A good example of that would be the city's transparency policy, which was adopted in accordance with Chapter 3 of the Code and the Georgia Open Records Act and other records retention laws to go through a process to receive those records. This adds the clarity as to how that is to occur.
So the boards then would be asked to develop their own protocols?
No, well, the boards may develop their own protocols in order to direct ethics or OIG as to how they're to request records. But this would clarify that if records are requested, that the proper way of getting them would be through existing City of Atlanta processes. Another example of where this is notable or would be, we have certain cybersecurity processes in place in order to protect our electronic records and the security of our systems. And so the processes available to get electronic records in accordance with those protections would be followed. This is what I understand is currently happening, though this provides some codification and clarification that that is the appropriate process.
Well, that was my next question. How are requests for documents currently handled?
Requests for documents are handled through, if they're electronic, they're sent to AIM, and AIM then coordinates with a vendor that the city pays in order to facilitate our server searches of records. And the vendor then provides a link to the electronic records directly to the requesting department. In this case, that might be the OIG or the ethics office.
All right, just from a process perspective, let me just say to colleagues and to the public, y'all obviously can question anyone out there in the audience that you want or share views. The OIG is here. Also here with us is retired Chief Justice Leah Ward Sears of the Georgia Supreme Court, who chaired the IG Task Force Reform. So I want to thank her for her presence here, and she's available as well to answer any questions. So moving on then, there's a concern that employees can refuse to provide the OIG with city property and force the OIG to issue subpoenas. And my interpretation of that, and I can be corrected if I'm misinterpreted, is what that means is if I'm a city employee and I'm asked to hand over my laptop, although I might personally choose to refuse, that opens me up to losing my job. And in fact, in the legislation currently does require compliance, correct?
That's correct. All employees are directed to cooperate with the Office of Inspector General. And so if an employee were to do that, they would find that they were at risk for disciplinary action by their own appointing authority for failure to comply or cooperate with the Office of Inspector General. Concerns have been raised that because the paper that is before you proposes to add language setting forth that if an employee were to refuse to do so and the device or other property was not turned over, that the Office of Inspector General or Ethics Office would have the ability to address that through the issuance of a subpoena. That is not to say that this says that employees are permitted to refuse, because the overall duty to cooperate remains. However, it provides guidance as to what should happen in the event that a person does refuse, not to say that refusal will be condoned. Currently, it is not clear as to what would happen if any such refusal were to occur, and this language is included in order to provide that clarity.
Okay, tangential question. I think a rational concern of a lot of people, including council's neo-Luddite when it comes to tech, is that, a delay would allow a subject to erase or delete information from a device. And it is my understanding, and I'm happy to get more clarity on this, that AIM would in fact or other such agencies would be able to detect those deletions, correct?
Absolutely, and depending on the type of device, it might not be possible. In the case of a laptop, any individual could attempt to delete things from a city laptop, but the information on a city laptop is generally stored on our servers and would be able to be recovered by AIM. When currently in employment matters or other matters where there is a need to determine what is on individuals' city laptops, there's a mechanism to go to AIM to find that out rather than even asking the individual employee.
Okay, thank you. The OIG has expressed its concern about having to give a copy of a subpoena regarding a subpoena to a third party. And could you clarify what's in the legislation?
So the legislation does
Well,
not.
hang on a second.
Yes,
Madam
I'm going to
City
take that
Attorney.
one. This is Patrice Perkins Hooker. I'm the city attorney. Amber and I have been working as a tag team on this legislation. That's why you've heard from both of us periodically. In this case, the question about the subpoena, first of all, only applies to third-party records. So if someone in the OIG office wants to see what your bank account looks like, that is a third-party subpoena. And we are requesting that they give the person a copy of it simultaneously with the issuance or release of it to the bank. That way, the person whose records are being solicited knows that the subpoena has been issued and they are given an opportunity to quash the subpoena. What you all want to do with this is the city council's perspective, okay? Because there is no standard format for OIG issuances of subpoenas. And whether you want to make this a criminal matter versus a civil matter is up to the council. The way it's drafted is based on the original intention, is that you all have this person internally looking at fraud, waste, abuse, and you all went ahead and said you have subpoena power. She has subpoena power now. That power only was not even removed. It was strengthened to protect the person the use of subpoenas for third party, not for a subpoena of an individual who is a person. If I'm under investigation, they can send me a subpoena. I'm supposed to provide information. But you don't really need to subpoena individuals because we are compelled to provide the information anyway. But if we didn't, that's a relief and a remedy for her. She already has. We didn't change that. What we changed was what happens with third parties and people accessing information that's beyond your knowledge.
All right, well, just to make sure I understand it, I was under the impression that the list of reasons why a municipal judge, would have to sign off was for a very narrowly tailored list of subject matter.
Well, the narrowly tailored subject matter are third-party providers that dealt with specifically financial records, medical records, and Amber, what was the third one?
Personal telecommunications records.
Right, your cell phone records, personal cell phone records. Those are the three instances in which the subpoena for the third parties is being required to be provided to an individual.
Thank you. Ms. Upstreet.
Personal as opposed to city issued.
Right, because city issued devices don't require a subpoena. The request needs to be made first to the employee, then to AIM. AIM has control over city cell phones to deal with Texas, and they also have control over city laptops.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the OIG is concerned about providing written updates to the board, concurring or reporting the status of ongoing investigations because she fears that compromises the integrity of ongoing investigations. And I'm hoping that some of that angst can be minimized as long as we no longer have a board that's handpicked by the mayor, and we'll hear from her when, in her own words about how she feels about that. It's just my personal belief that she does need to report to the board and keep the board apprised. The board will, in effect, supervise her. And so I'm going to leave it up to you, Madam IG, to sort of flesh out that concern as we consider this in the weeks to come. If no one else has any questions on that, let's move on. The OIG is concerned about the requirement to inform employees that they're compelled to make statements to the OIG and that those statements would not be used against them in any criminal prosecutions. And she fears that would hinder accountability for the most serious conduct, which is criminal conduct. So what language currently exists that governs that?
Yes, this is not an accurate statement of any change in the new legislation.
Right.
Currently, the OIG does not have the ability to do any type of criminal investigation herself. What she has the power to do under the existing legislation is, if she discovers it, is to refer it out to the DA or solicitor's office or appropriate criminal investigation authority. In addition, there is been a dispute, which legally is not a basis for a dispute, but is a dispute about whether or not compelled statements from employees, which you all made a requirement for compelling cooperation, can be used against you later on in any criminal investigation. And that's a no from the Supreme Court, not from Patrice's opinion. That's the Supreme Court, and Garrity has said if you compel somebody to make a statement, you can't use that statement against them. So currently, we're trying to make certain that that's codified and we don't have the disconnect about the misinterpretations by both sides when we know what the law is with regard to the use of a compelled statement. She is factually correct that once you have a compelled statement, you cannot use that against the person in any criminal investigation.
And stupid question perhaps, but what's a compelled statement versus a voluntary statement or uncompelled statement?
Right, we don't have voluntary statements when you compel the cooperation of employees or they are fearing that they're going to lose their job. That was set up in the preamble when you created this. You wanted cooperation, and you compelled your employees to cooperate fully.
Okay, let's say the IG interviews an employee, and then a subsequent criminal investigation determines that said employee was involved in felonious activity.
Mm-hmm.
The statement that employee made to the IG would remain shielded, correct?
Yes, it would not be transferred over.
Okay, but it could be the subject of the subsequent criminal investigation if they, through other means, found otherwise. Is that right?
Yes, the OIG is responsible to let the people know, hey, I've discovered that there is a problem with the procurement of such and such, or I have a problem with some violation or alleged violation of a crime. But she can't just turn her file over to them. She can report the issue, but she can't turn over the file of all of her investigatory interviews and things like that. They would have to conduct their own.
Okay, and then, thank you. And then the last bullet I have on this list, and I look forward to continued dialogue. There's concern again about subpoenas being approved by a municipal court judge, and that's going to cause undue delay in terms of routine functions. But that just circles us back to the same. That circles us back to the prior discussion, right? Which is municipal judge sign-offs are only required under the narrowly tailored reasons we've discussed.
That's correct.
That exhausts my list of questions at the moment. Happy to turn this over to colleagues for discussion purposes. I will make a motion to bring forward the substitute. There's a second by Mr. Wan. Any questions about that procedural motion? We're not adopting it, but we are bringing it forward. All right, seeing none, let's open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the guys have it, substitutes before us. One thing that did come up, there was a comment from one of the commenters expressing their dismay that no NPU officers could serve on this board, but am I right that they're prohibited by the charter from serving on any board, any city board?
They are prohibited from serving on the governing board of the Office of the Inspector General and the Ethics Office currently. So that's not a change. So in the charter for this board, as it currently stands, officers of MPUs are not allowed to be appointed by APAB to serve as members of this governing board.
But they are on other boards.
They may.
Okay.
This is a specific issue with this board as it currently is in the charter.
Thank you for the clarification, Ms. Bakhtiari.
Thank you. I wanted to address a few things and also ask a couple questions. Well, mostly address. A lot of my constituents are very confused to find my name on this paper. I wanted to clarify that piece because this is not typical of me. I believe in this office. I believe in the integrity of this office. I believe in protecting this office. I believe in finding a balance between what we've been seeing in the political theater that has been flooding our social media the past, I don't know how many weeks, months. So for me, it is not about this administration. It is not about this OIG. It's about making sure this is set up for long-term success. Especially, we know this is necessary. We saw what happened 2 administrations ago. We're seeing continued results from that investigation, which is why this office was created. I believe that if you're not at the table, then you're probably on the menu. That's why I signed up for this paper. I have a number of edits I've submitted. I haven't heard back about them yet. There's a lot to digest here. I believe that these edits, and I really want to thank Councilmember Shook for his leadership on this because this individual fought incredibly hard to get the board changed and to get corruption put back in, amongst other things. I am not a lawyer, shocker, so I don't understand a number of things that have been brought up. I haven't personally been given enough time to review. I want to understand. I don't believe this is ready to move forward. There's a number of things that I have issue with. Of course, I want to make sure that this office has the ability to properly investigate. I don't believe in taking all the teeth out of this office. And now I'm also still learning the piece on the Supreme Court. I did not know that before. So I am learning. I want to understand those things. So I believe in a balance. I believe mistakes have been made on both sides in many ways. I don't believe this should be rushed. I believe that we have an opportunity to get it right. And I think that a lot of our constituents don't understand what's going on because you aren't in the high-level conversations and you don't know about inside baseball, and why would you? I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. So to that point, I also wanted to talk about needing a work session because you need to understand what's been going on because you don't know about the conversations that have been happening. I think the work session should take place on January 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 30th, or 31st. We have time. And constituents deserve and the public deserves to hear more than what's being discussed right now. There needs to be additional elaboration on that. Also, I mean, I would be remiss to state that I've gotten also constituent complaints about being emailed and feeling intimidated and scared and thinking they were under investigation. I have to take those into account. I have to take into account what city employees have been saying. I also have to take into account what the OIG has suggested. This is not supposed to be an emotional conversation. I am trying to deal solely in fact. And if those who have seen me in here know that taking emotion out of things is not an easy thing for me. But I believe in removing the emotion out of this conversation and dealing in fact, because I don't want this office and this OIG to feel targeted by me. In fact, I believe in it so much that I submitted a report a year ago to investigate our poor management of shelters during the winter. Now, I will say it's been about a year and I still haven't gotten the results of that investigation. That is an issue for me because I was intending on using the results of that investigation to ensure that the mismanagement of those shelters for our unsheltered population did not happen again this winter. Because our unsheltered population must be looked out for. We must have shelters. We must be able to provide every person with shelter and the ability to stay out of the cold so they don't freeze to death. So I am frustrated that I haven't gotten the results of that investigation yet. And what I will say is also, I do not agree with I do not believe that this paper is ready to go. I have submitted a number of edits. I have not heard back on those yet. I also don't fully understand what's been proposed today. So I wanted to give that clarity and understand that the reason I'm on this table and the reason you see my name up there is because I believe that we can make this paper better, and I'm here to fight to make that happen. So just wanted to elaborate, but I also am not currently ready to vote to move this forward. I believe that we should be taking our time, even though we have weeks to edit. I understand that, but that's just personally where I stand, and I wanted to add that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just want to just state, for the record, that I also believe in the intent and the work and the mission of the Office of the Inspector General. But I think it's important that we go back and talk about how we got here today. And as council members, we weren't, for lack of better words, trying to stir up a hornet's nest, thinking about how we could change the Office of the Inspector General. This came about because we had some anonymous, some on the record employees work for the City of Atlanta that came to us that had some claims about abuse coming out of the office. Almost parallel, almost at the same time, we had a meeting where the Inspector General came before us and also talked about some instances where she felt like her office was being hindered from doing their investigations. And so this started a whole process for us. And part of that process included convening a task force that went through a thoughtful process that came out with several recommendations. Some of those recommendations the Inspector General is on the record saying that she agrees with. And what this also came about was us taking a look at this charter, looking at the role and responsibilities of the Inspector General, and there's a lot of ambiguity in that job. About a year ago, we took out the ethics office from under the purview of the Inspector General. When we did that, it left a lot of ambiguity between the job of the Inspector General as well as the ethics office. So there are a lot of clerical things that are in this paper that need to be cleaned up. Some of them are just the way words are meant for the ethics office versus the Inspector General office. So I think the general public knows that once we started unveiling and kind of the onion here, so to speak, and peeling back the layers, we started looking at the language, we started looking at things that from a clerical standpoint need to be changed, and I think everyone is in agreement about that, about that language. And part of this, for me, has been looking at the role of making sure that this role is about administrative investigative powers. And where the waters has gotten murky a little bit is about whether that also includes criminal investigative powers that seem right now to be unfettered, or at least they aren't explained in a way that is clear for everyone that is involved in any dealings with the Office of Inspector General. And so that is something that I think we're working hard to try to figure out. I know that Mr. Chair has been working diligently with all of us in trying to clear some of these things out. As part of this process, the Inspector General laid out about 7 things that I think we've laid on the table today that she was not comfortable with, and we're still going through some of those, and I think we'll continue to go through that process. Of those 7 things, I think I still have 1 that I have issue with, and that's about the governing board and that process and how we lay that out, and I think that still needs to be fixed before we move forward. But other than that, I think we're getting close to the finish line, and I think we're getting close to where we all are on the same page. We're not there yet, in my opinion, but I think we're getting close, and I think I just wanted to state that for the record before we move forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Wan.
Before, real fast for the audience at home, it said for a moment, Jason Dozier. This is Jason Winston, so I don't want any confusion.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Wan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't, actually, the 4 of us were not on council when the first OIG paper was passed, and I think we came in understanding it would continue to be an evolution. We did a little bit in 2022, and again, this is not necessarily a surprise to me that we're addressing this and continue to refine and make something that works for the city. For me, seeing the substitute today, my 2 key non-starters were addressed, the word corruption being put back in and the appointment process for the board. So I'm grateful that the work that's been done by Chair Shook and others in the background have resulted at least in that change. Where I do still have question about is much like my colleague, Mr. Winston, is around the board composition. We've obviously heard from the League of Women Voters about their concerns about being removed. I'm curious if anyone has heard from the other entities that have been, or being proposed to be shifted off of this. That would be the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, as well as the colleges and universities. So does anyone know if we've heard anything or concerns from those two groups? Okay, I'm curious to see if there, and if maybe there is an objection to it, and that speaks volumes in and of itself. Second thing, I'm curious to hear from the Inspector General herself. We've heard from everybody, and I don't know if she wants an opportunity to address or respond to all the talk that has gone on before this point. So I don't know if she's in here. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see. So here's your chance to go get to the mic and say anything if you have any response or feedback on anything that's been said.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Wan, for the invitation to speak on the substitute. I only received the substitute at 1:56, and so I have not had an opportunity to review them in earnest. And while I've had one conversation with a council member surrounding these issues, I've had no other dialogue with the council surrounding the pretty significant changes that are being proposed that impact this office. And so I certainly don't mean to turn this normal FEC meeting into a work session. I know that that has been discussed. You've gotten into some of the substantive issues. The short of it is that we still have very significant issues, even with the changes that have been proposed. I don't think that this is the appropriate forum to get into them, but to the extent that I'm not afforded another one, in brief, the structural changes to the board still make this board a political board. It is the insertion of members that would be appointed by the mayor and the council where there is none. The fact that there are currently none is what makes this city's structure of oversight for an Office of Inspector General a national model, and one of the reasons that I noted that this then takes the city backwards. Jurisdictionally, the idea that this office should focus solely on administrative problems completely ignores the entire chain of events that precipitated the founding of this office in the first place. Regarding access, the short answer there is that best practices call for full and unrestricted access. At every opportunity, I've tried to make clear to anyone who is willing to listen that the things that we've been doing in the office have been consistent with industry standard and best practice, and I've invited the conversation to talk about those things. And the hope was that there could be public engagement, not with our office, because I understand there might be some idea that we might not be objective in this because we have a horse in the race, but we have been complying with industry standards. The hope was that there would be the engagement with experts who could actually speak to this. The Association of Inspectors General had made itself available to speak to the task force, but much more importantly, there needed to be public engagement with these issues. Because one of the comments that's been made was that, well, this doesn't comply with what any of us thought would happen. Well, there was a lot of consideration that went into deciding to have an Office of Inspector General. Offices of Inspector General have certain meanings and trappings, and the Association of Inspectors General is available and wanted to be involved in a public discussion about what it means to have an Office of Inspector General. Because it's not like the other oversight entities, it's not like other prosecuting entities, it is special, it is unique, and the public deserves to hear more about all of the features that make it so. With respect to the subpoena disclosure, the very brief part is that it is antithetical to any notion of investigations that we would then provide during an active investigation information to a subject regarding the investigation. It doesn't comport with any notion of investigative protocol. with the ongoing issues, the ongoing investigations where there is some notion in the written comments that there's been a dispute between OIG and its board regarding reporting. That is the first that I would have heard about that, except for the discussion during the task force, because there's never been any such notion of any such problem brought to the Office of the Inspector General by its governing board. We report routinely to our board about closed matters, about matters that have come in, about other performance metrics. We don't report about active investigations. And again, there's a reason for that. We're complying with best practices. The Association of Inspectors General has spoken specifically about this in the position paper, talking about the appropriate oversight for offices of Inspector General. They said, demand for information or giving direction regarding ongoing audits, investigations, or reviews would be considered interference, hindering IG independence, and could result in a public loss of confidence in an independent and impartial Inspector General. Regarding this compelled statements, of course, our office is aware of the Supreme Court and Garrity. We are very aware of that because that is part of what informs our decision to have those interviews be voluntary. So no, we don't want to have compelled statements because we want to be able to use the information gathered if it comes to the point where we need to hold individuals accountable. So that's the short from what I've been able to review just in the brief time that I've heard the discussion regarding the proposed substitute and the information that was provided just maybe an hour ago. I hope very much to have the opportunity to more fully engage with the proposed substitute, and I hope very much that the entire body have a public discussion that involves objective experts from the Association of Inspectors General. Thank you.
Thanks. Before you leave, though, I mean, I do appreciate, and I will go on record of supporting a work session on this because of the level of complexity and the breadth of impact on this. We'll see where this ends up today. You talk a lot about best practices. I want to zero in on two particular things you said. One is regard to criminal investigation authority. Is it in fact a best practice that the Inspector General wouldn't turn a criminal investigation over to other authorities like state, U.S. Attorney, GBI, FBI at that point? I mean, I kind of feel like maybe I'm missing something here, but I feel like that's being preserved, obviously, is that ability and that extra firepower. So what can you tell me about that?
Those things are not at odds. The way that it typically works in the office is that we have allegations that we investigate, and when we find that there is criminal misconduct, we then engage in conversations with prosecutors and potentially other law enforcement partners to then have that case proceed from there. So it is both the case that you investigate allegations that come, because that's how you determine if there's in fact potential misconduct that needs to be pursued. And then there are those discussions with the law enforcement partners.
Maybe it's the nuance that I'm missing. So I'll put a pin in that one. The other piece I'm also struggling a little bit with the subpoena thing issue, especially with the clarification we received that it's subpoenas for third party that relate to financial, health, and personal device or telecommunications. For me, I feel I would want certain protections for me that would at least put a check on anyone at the city's availability just to go get those pieces of information without my knowing it. I understand what you're saying about the integrity of investigation, but there's got to be a line somewhere, where my rights as an individual, and especially, financial and health information, which I would imagine most people in the city would agree are sacred, that there would need to be some sort of, and maybe is it best practice across the country, as you assert, that those concerns are unreasonable for an individual and an employee. And I wouldn't even limit it to just necessarily a government entity, but I would say to the private sector as well. It surprises me a little bit that if that is a best practice.
Yeah, so there's absolutely variation among offices of Inspector General. Not all offices of Inspector General have subpoena authority. For those that do, I am not familiar with any jurisdiction that would impose the requirements and regulations that are being discussed today.
Interesting. Yeah, I still maintain that's where I get a little anxious is when you're talking about personal financial information, health information.
And I think that this is exactly the kind of issue that would really benefit from full discussion and disclosure and public exploration with the Association of Inspectors General.
Okay, I appreciate that. Again, I will state, I would very much appreciate a work session. I'm relieved, at least if this does move out of committee today, what the law department said about that we would still have an opportunity to do it and fine tune along the way, so long as we weren't making substantive or significant changes to it. But I appreciate your responses. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I know Ms. Bakhtiari is next, but under the circumstances, I'm now going to give Chief Justice Sears the opportunity to make any comments she would like, and then we'd have the opportunity to ask her any questions we might like.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you today. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Leah Ward Sears. I served for 18 years on the Georgia Supreme Court. Before that time, I was a Fulton County Superior Court judge, and before that time, I was a lawyer with the firm of Alston and Bird. I currently am a lawyer with Smith, Gambrell, Russell. I'm here basically to talk to you or answer any questions that anybody might have about the process that the task force went through in coming up with this report. I'd heard some talk that, was sort of hastily done. We didn't get a lot of material and that kind of thing. I thought I had put most of this to bed before Christmas after turning in the report November 6th, when the city attorney called and said, please come down here today. I got all the documents together that I had put together, and you can see they're here in these boxes. It was quite a lot of material that was sent. But let me just say a couple of things. At the outset, I want to say that I, in fact, chaired the commission a few years ago that decided ultimately that we should have the OIG. Okay, that was the first commission a few years ago. Okay, and then I was called upon, thank you very much, Ms. City Attorney, a few months ago to chair this task force with the job of, it was clear that this needed to evolve. We got the basic structure in place, but that there needed to be some tweaks in the process, and I agreed to chair this particular task force. The reason I say I was on the Supreme Court is because I want to be clear that the process I used to complete this task in the time that we had was the process I got used to using as a Supreme Court justice. And so I'm going to just kind of walk you through the process. To fulfill our mandate, the task force engaged in what was really a rigorous and inclusive process, which involved several steps. Number one, we conducted public hearings to gather evidence and testimony, all in these boxes, draft an initial memorandum, which I personally wrote as a starting point to the group's deliberations. I sat at my computer at my office on West Peachtree Street and drafted the initial draft of the task force report. Then I circulated this draft among the task force members for extensive input and feedback, and that resulted in 8 distinct drafts. So the very first draft is very different from the 8th and final draft, which we ultimately turned into the city council and the mayor. As with respect to the public hearings, they were open to stakeholders. I think they were even open to the Office of the Inspector General, who couldn't come, but who provided information. Open to experts, open to members of the public. We did receive testimony on the operations of the OIG, the ethics officer, and the governing board. All of this was augmented by exhibits and written submissions and by other material. In addition to the public hearings, many task force members reached out to other OIG offices around the country by telephone. Some conducted calls to gather information, learn about their particular processes, and to understand best practices. And this information directly influenced and shaped our final recommendations. Every single task force member had some kind of input into what was finally developed. We summarized the testimony, the evidence, and the input that was received, highlighted the key issues facing the OIG, the ethics officer, and the governing board. And as you know, we proposed preliminary recommendations for addressing these particular issues. Again, each member submitted their thoughts, their edits, and their recommendations in this process. Their input was critical in refining the document and ensuring it reflected a collective expertise and diverse perspectives of the group. The city attorney did not draft the document by design. She acted as our scribe. So did everybody, okay? Everybody wrote copious written notes from the hearings, which were invaluable ultimately to me in preparing the initial draft and ensuring that no detail was overlooked. With that said, are there any questions or comments that I can address at this time?
Questions for the retired Chief Judge? I don't have a question. I do have a comment. I was, full disclosure, I was a member of that board.
Yes.
Along with one of my colleagues here. And I will just say, and I've served, on a lot of boards around here and that have looked at, very heavy subject matter. I have to say, I thought it was a very thoughtful exercise, and I thought the participants were all highly qualified, and I'm very grateful for their input as well. And I think the reform suggestions formed a really logical starting point. You can't take the politics out of politics, however, so here we are. But I just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay.
Does anyone else have anything for the Chief Judge? Ms. Overstreet.
Judge Sears, did you receive the copy of the substitute that we went over today during council, the difference in? No?
No.
Okay, I'm going to make
I'm
sure you
just
get that.
focusing on, I can't really quick, give you comments on that report. I'm just really here on the task force and not to comment on the legislation.
And I wouldn't want you to. I just want to make sure you have that.
Okay.
And I really want you, so it's not really a question, but I want you to comment on the perception that the task force and the recommendations from the task force were preconceived. And I want you to talk about, you've already talked about the integrity that you bring to the task force and to the whole process in the first place. But I want you to talk about how I don't think anyone on the task force had any idea of the direction that it would go on the day that we all met. Oh, and just so that I clarify, I was also on the actual task force with Councilmember Shook. Because it almost seems as if there's it was supposed to be scripted and something that just isn't true. I want to talk about how neutral and very organic that task force was and how we came about where we are.
Okay, so, you know, I didn't have any preconceived notions. You know, I'm trained as jurist. I'm a trained jurist. And so when you go to court, you listen, and then you don't go to court with a preconceived, maybe some people do nowadays. It's not as good as it was, but no, that you're supposed to go unbiased, you listen, and I personally had no I don't have a dog in the fight right now, other than to see that the city of Atlanta has the best OIG ethics, process. That's my dog in the fight. That's all I really care about. I like the idea that the city has an OIG. As I said, I served on the first commission and the OIG called me when she was first hired, and we met and talked, and was really glad to see her here. But it is time that we tweak the processes and procedures. There's a lot of concerns, and you need adequate guardrails. I mean, I remember somebody said during our hearings, you need an FBI, but you don't need J. Edgar Hoover. Okay, so you always need guardrails. Anybody with power, even like me, you have to have, you have to have guardrails. You have to have limits. And that's what I thought the task force, the task force, they're not politicians. I've been a jurist, but I've never been like this. I'm not that kind of politician.
And I just really wanted you to just speak about that. I find that that's incredibly important to put out there, that no one had any idea the direction that the task force would go. We were just simply charged with making sure that our OIG was best in class, best practices. And I was certainly willing to go wherever that was so that we would have all of the guardrails as well as the, preserving the teeth of the
That's
OIG
correct.
and to maintain the OIG for the city of Atlanta.
That's correct. And the report says that in writing. Many, many times I get calls from the media who just ignore that. I mean, I get how that works,
Right.
but it's very clear over and over again. We need an OIG. We want an OIG. We want to preserve an OIG, but we need adequate guardrails.
And I want to state that as well. I've said about 100 times now that I believe that the city of Atlanta deserves an OIG.
Right.
I believe that it's important that we continue down this road to make sure that we have the best OIG setup possible. If anyone doesn't know, all of the task force meetings were public, so that means that they're somewhere where they can be viewed. Is that correct? Is that still a possibility?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that. Thank you, I yield.
All right, thank you. I want to thank Ms. Bakhtiari for her patience. We're now back to that speaker's queue. We have Ms. Bakhtiari. I know Ms. Norwood would like to be recognized. I know Council President Shipman would like to be recognized, and any others.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, a little too close. Thank you so much for coming to speak, and also thank you, Ms. Manigault, for coming up. Don't worry, I have no questions for you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sit down?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Believe me, you don't want to stay at that podium. And I would not recommend becoming one of these politicians. Don't do it. So real quick, I wanted to give the individual a shout out that spoke at public comment who works at the state. I really appreciated your comment about understanding that the office needs to mature. It certainly takes time. And guardrails and understanding what we're actually adopting. So I appreciate you saying that. I enjoyed your comments. And one of the things I also did want to say is to Ms. Manigault, also, I only received this substitute around 11. So that is absolutely something we need to get better at. So I apologize. And another reason that I want more time to look over it. And the one thing I did want to ask before we moved on was with everyone here so that we better understand, how do we go about getting a work session? Can we explain that to the public? Like, how do we go about setting that up? What are the next steps we need to take? Would that be you, Mr. Chair, setting up the work session if we were to move forward on that?
Yeah, I'll have to canvass the members to find a mutually acceptable time.
Okay. I just wanted to name that so we had an understanding of how that works. But yes, those were the only things I wanted to clarify. I guess we'll have to hold our breath to see if I have something else to say later. Thanks.
Ms. Norwood.
Yes, I just wanted to say to the audience, I have passed out information, which is what we've been discussing today, the various requests that the OIG had for the council and the council's responses to that. This is a public document, so any of y'all that want a copy, I'll get more copies here at the end of the meeting, and we'll be glad for anyone in the audience who wants a copy. It's public, it's from the council, and it is for public consumption.
Thank you. Council President Shipman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been digesting the various steps of this process, including these substitutions today, and there seem to be 5 key questions that we're coming back to. So I have a couple of questions on those, but I just wanted to outline where I see those 5 key questions that we're wrestling with. One is the notion of voluntary testimony versus compelled testimony. And that seems a very important choice that has to be made. And Madam City Attorney, I've just make sure if you want to come to the mic or just if I'm correct, the Fifth Amendment basically protects against self-incrimination, among other things. And so you have to choose between voluntary and compelled, because if it's voluntary, somebody could basically maintain their Fifth Amendment right, but if it's compelled, they can't, right? And so as soon as you go into a compelled state, that basically cannot be used further because it was compelled, and it's against the Fifth Amendment, right? And so it's kind of an either or. You got to be on one side of voluntary versus compelled or the other. It doesn't feel like there's a kind of a middle ground there because of the Fifth Amendment. So I think we have to think very carefully about that line, and I'm interested to hear more from the OIG's office about why, if I heard correctly, that they prefer voluntary versus compelled. I would also ask the city attorney for council members if you could just do a bit more of a brief for us on Garrity, because I think this is a vital issue for us to understand, including issues like if it is voluntary and someone refuses, is that grounds for dismissal, or are they protected from dismissal? So if we had an OIG investigation, somebody said, it's now voluntary, I'm not going to cooperate, then what happens? Because this is a really important piece of this decision, I think. The second is the subpoena power for outside material that we keep coming back to around health records. And I think that this also is one that is incredibly important for us to thoughtfully consider. Councilmember Juan, I think, has brought up the 2 that are very important for us to digest. One is health records. Giving an OIG of any kind the power to subpoena health records with zero oversight is a tremendous power. And one, I think that we should make sure that we are comfortable with. And 2 is every member on council has 2 cell phones. And we do that for a very particular reason, because when you join this council, you are told this one is the city's. Anything on here can be asked for open records at any time. It is a public, almost a public document by its very nature. And if you want to talk to your kids and not have it come out in open records, if you want to talk to your spouse and not have it come out to open records, if you want to talk to your healthcare provider and not have it in open records, you need to put it on your personal phone. But if the power to subpoena a device that is personal is all-encompassing, then what's the point of 2 phones? And that is a very important decision, I think, that this legislation has to consider. 3, and somewhat related in my mind, is this notion of whether or not the OIG's office needs to be reporting in some form or fashion to a board of directors during an investigation. I think that there are obviously positions on both sides of that, but if a board is in fact the governing authority of the office, then it does very much curtail its power to require that it only receive reports after the fact. So I think that has to be very carefully considered. The point about the independence of the board, I think, is one that you have seen that is being wrestled with. And I think that we should continue to wrestle with that one. I would simply say, from my perspective, if it holds that council and the mayor both have appointments, I would ask that they not be the chair. I think that it's important that if you have that kind of construction, that neither one of those appointments be the chair. And I also would say that the requirement that they be an attorney does feel limiting. One of the appointing authorities is the certified fraud examiners. You don't have to have a law degree to be a certified fraud examiner, and I think a certified fraud examiner could absolutely chair this board. So I'm not sure that compelling a law degree, with all due respect to our lawyers, is necessary here. And then 5 is whether or not subjects should be informed, and particularly this notion in A101E1 in a couple of places that a subject has to be informed as to the nature of the investigation. You know, I think that feels to me like a line that should not be crossed. I don't see how the overall process is strengthened if a subject is informed of why an investigation is happening while it's happening. Sort of like the SEC with stockbrokers and financial managers. The SEC shows up, they don't have to say we're looking at this particular thing and this particular reason. They simply say we want to see the records around this day of your activity. That to me feels like table stakes when it comes to having an effective OIG. And so I think that should be very carefully considered and potentially revisited. But those 5 questions feel central to what we are dealing with, and I would simply say I'm continuing to form my opinions on several of them, but I continue to ask myself the question, what problem are we trying to solve? What problem are we fundamentally trying to solve? And if we are not fundamentally solving a problem, then I don't think we're there yet. So I look forward to continuing of this process to get at those 5 questions, among others. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I think you've done a great job in pinpointing the things that require more discussion. I can think of a few others, but as has been pointed out, this isn't even the first step of a long path. The first step was the creation of the office, and then the subsequent learning process we underwent, and then the task force that came up with the need for improvements, and then that morphs into a charter change. So, I mean, this is a very, very lengthy public process that's going to go on for a good bit. And is there anything else anyone wants to say? Because if not, I'm going to explain why I'm going to make the motion I'm about to make. I have always held that if something needs to be fixed, the surest way not to fix it is to hold it in perpetuity. And I know no one says they want to hold it in perpetuity, but I've been around here for a while, so I can read code. We have an opportunity here to begin to fix what we all agree needs to be fixed. And that's not to say that if this gets approved, and remember, approval just simply means it then goes to the Committee on Council. And it's going to be like a bottle that's in the ocean, and it's going to go back and forth with the tides and get read and reread. So I'm for starting to fix what we can and to keep working on this work session. Fine. I'll canvass everyone, and we'll figure that out. I will predict at the end of the day, though, some of this is going to come down to the need to agree to disagree, because none of these issues that we've discussed here have been discussed for the first time. Most of them, we've been discussing for years. And it's kind of interesting that in a lot of these matters, we have just 2 very different interpretations of the law and of standard operating procedure. I've looked enough at models of IGs to know really no 2 are the same. There's a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of differences too. So I want to get the ball rolling. I want to get this fixed. We can take a step towards that today. And so I will make a motion to refer this to the Committee on Council. Second by Overstreet. Discussion. Are we ready? Let's vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hillis. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to, since I've been quietly listening up here, I just want to say I generally agree with what all of my colleagues have said. You know, we all believe there needs to be change to come about, and share some of the heightened concerns about the subpoena powers and else that was mentioned. And as, you know, Councilmember Shook said, you know, our job as legislators is to find common ground, a middle ground, because if we come away and one side is giddy and the other side is totally upset, then we haven't done our job, and that can be applied to pretty much any piece of legislation. Can think of a few held in some certain committees right now that come to mind. But you know, and as has already been hashed out by Ms. Robinson, you know, this is not, I won't say a normal piece of legislation, because I guess no piece of legislation is normal, but it is a charter amendment. It has not 2 stops, as a lot of legislation does. It has 6 stops. So we can kind of pull back, hold up, whatever we need to do at each of those stops. And so I will look forward to moving this along, but then also taking a step back at each step, and also scheduling the work session that has been requested, and I agree that needs to happen. So just want to explain where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren.
This is a clarification question. So let's say it moves to Committee on Council, then goes to full council. Will it come back to FEC and Committee on Council in the next cycle again? It'll follow the same identical path. So we'll get a second bite of the apple in 2 weeks on this one. Right? Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Let's vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the vote is 5-1 to 1. Sadly, that is not the only item of business we have before us today. And so now we will move on to the rest of our lengthy agenda. We've read in the consent items. That takes us to 24-0-1699. This is an ordinance by Finance Exec, waiving the chapter articles indicated here on behalf of the Atlanta Information Management to apply for and accept an award for the FY22 State and Local Cybersecurity Program from the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency in an amount not to exceed $62,550 to be utilized for supporting enhanced security initiatives, to execute any necessary agreements, to accept the award, which requires matching funds in an amount not to exceed $6,950, to amend the FY25 intergovernmental budget by adding 2 anticipations and appropriations in an amount not to exceed $62,550, all funds to be charged to and paid from, etc. And so I will move to bring forward a substitute. Caption's the same. The nature of the substitute is it corrects the caption. Does it change the caption?
I don't see any changes.
Yeah, the caption's the same. And it inserts a new 4th whereas clause, so I'll move to bring the substitute forward. Second by Juan. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Substitutes before us. I'll move approval on substitute. Second by Mr. Juan. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, let's open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it, so ordered. 25-1001 is an ordinance by Mr. Bond, waiving the code section indicated here of the Atlanta City Code to authorize the mayor as designee to execute change order number 4 to the agreement indicated here, Mythix Oracle Cloud Support with Mythix, Inc., on behalf of the Department of Finance to add services related to land management, permitting, and licensing, to amend the number of licenses, and to add funding in an amount not to exceed blank. All contract work will be charged to and paid from, et cetera. The admin has asked that we hold this. I'll make that motion. Second by Juan. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
And items held. 25-01004 is an ordinance by Mr. Amos to waive the section of the code indicated here to authorize the mayor as designee on behalf of the mayor's Office of Violence Reduction to amend the contract indicated Emergency Violence Prevention and Reduction Program Administration Services with Offender Alumni Association to extend the term effective May 7th of 2025 and ending on June 30th, 2025 for the purposes of prevention and intervention of gun violence in the city during the summer break. All contracted services shall be charged to and paid from the accounts listed and for other purposes. Motion to approve by Amos, second by Juan. Seeing no other questions, let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it, so ordered. That takes us to 25-01005. This needs a substitute. The caption's different, so let me read the caption of the proposed substitute. This is an ordinance by Ms. Overstreet, substituted by Finance Exec, authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $3,500 from the District 11 carry forward account to Morehouse School of Medicine to support STEM students from Atlanta Unbound Academy pursuant to the section of the charter indicated here. And for other purposes, motion to bring the substitute forward. Second by Juan. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Substitutes before us. Ms. Overstreet, would you like to make a motion? Second by Juan. Let's open that vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it. 25-01007 is an ordinance by Shook, authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed blank from the Council President carry forward account to various nonprofit organizations to support park improvements pursuant to the section of the charter, which is indicated here. And this comes forward favorably on condition of receiving a substitute, and that plugs in the amendment. Do we have that? Oh, that's right. Forgot where I was here for a second. So that's my motion to send it forward on condition of receiving a substitute. Second by Juan. Yes, sir.
Just briefly, the condition is to make sure that we have the right list. Well, one of the things that I'm trying to do with this legislation is actually support parks and park associations and conservancies across all 12 districts. And so I'm trying to make sure that each of the districts are, in fact, benefiting from this. So in order to dot the i's and cross the t's, I want to make sure that that list is, in fact, comprehensive of the whole city. But I appreciate my colleagues' support of allowing me to support the good parks that are happening across the entire city.
All right, thank you. I'll read the caption of the proposed substitute for 25-01008. This is an ordinance by Shook, a substitute.
1,000.
Oh, we didn't vote. Let's do that. Got that right.
The vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it. I will read the caption, the proposed substitute for 25-01008. Ordinance by Shook, substituted by finance exec. This is an ordinance supplementing that certain ordinance indicated here, adopted by the city on the date indicated and approved by the mayor on the date indicated to, among other things, provide for one, the sale during FY25 of up to $4,000,000 in aggregate principal amount of City of Atlanta general obligation bonds, the Series 2025 bonds, through a direct placement. Two, to authorize the execution and delivery of said 2025 bonds. Three, to authorize the naming of a bond registrar and paying agent for said Series 2025 bonds. Four, to authorize the adoption of a form to which said Series 2025 bond shall adhere. Five, to authorize the preparation of tax digest and the levy of a tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest on those bonds. Six, to authorize the CFO to create a bond fund, number 3171. Seven, to amend the FY25 budget by adding to anticipations and appropriations on the Series 2025 bond proceeds and for other purposes. Could we just get a few? Hey, Mr. Knight. And please tell us why this is needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Courtney Knight, Chief of Treasury, Debt and Investments. Under the Georgia Constitution, the city is permitted to issue $4 million of general obligation bonds each fiscal year without a referendum. So this $4 million financing is a representative of that for fiscal year 25. We took bids for banks which would be interested in buying the bonds. We received 8 bids ranging from 3.98% to 4.85%. The winning bidder is Regions Bank, and the bonds are being used to finance various capital improvements to the city's facilities, including, curiously, improvements to Channel 26.
Motion to bring the substitute forward, second by Mr. Wan. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Any questions or comments? And I will second that. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Thank you. We've acted on 12. That takes us to 13, which is 25-0-1010, an ordinance by Mr. Wan authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $1,500 from the District 6 carry-forward account to the Piedmont Park Conservancy pursuant to the code section, or the charter section, which is indicated here. Motion to approve by Wan. I will second that. Seeing no questions or comments, let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it. That takes us already to resolutions. And the first one is 25R3002. Is the caption's the same? Thank you. Resolution by Mr. Amos authorizing the mayor or his designee to issue task order number 10 for the contract indicated, citywide architectural planning, design, engineering, and construction phase services with Fitzgerald Collaborative Group, LLC, for the design of the communication and audio-visual systems at the City of Atlanta's Emergency 911 Operations Center on behalf of DEAM in an amount not to exceed $3,657,100, all work to be charged to and paid from the accounts listed.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and other members of the council. My name is Chris Davis, Commissioner for the Department of Enterprise Asset Management. Purpose of this legislation, as is written, is for the design services for the 911 center.
Is there a substitute for that?
There is a substitute.
All right, let's open the vote on.
The vote is open. Vote is closed.
Caption's the same, correct?
Caption is the same.
All right, let's open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it. Thank you. 25R3005. It's a resolution by Ms. Overstreet authorizing the reemployment of retiree Camille Love as a senior policy advisor in the Office of Cultural Affairs. The executive offices pursuant to the section of the charter indicated here for a period not to exceed 520 business days. Compensation will be charged to and paid from the sources indicated in an amount not to exceed $62,720 at the department's request. I will move to file this. Second by Juan. If there's nothing else, let's open that motion to file.
The vote is open. Would all members please vote? And the vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it. That takes us to 25R3006. Is the caption the same? Caption changes. Okay, thank you. Resolution by members Juan, Bakhtiari, and Westmoreland, as substituted by Finance Exec, authorizing the city to donate an amount not to exceed $1,500 to the Kennesaw State University Foundation, Inc., pursuant to the code section of the charter listed here, to provide support in the university's student architect and design competition for a potential City of Atlanta LGBTQ plus community center, to authorize the CFO or his designee to make the donation payments from the accounts listed and for other purposes. I will second that. Let's open that procedural vote on bringing the substitute before us.
The vote is open.
Okay.
Vote is closed.
It's before us, Mr. Juan.
Yeah, I moved to amend to add Councilmember Amir Faroki's name. He asked to be added on.
Is he coming in?
Second. Mr. Winston as well. All right. Motion's been made and seconded to add those two colleagues' names as sponsors. If there's nothing else, let's open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
And I will second that. Seeing no questions, let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed again.
All right, the ayes have it. Item 17 is 25R3009, a resolution by Finance Exec authorizing the mayor's designee to execute special procurement agreement, which is listed here, research advisory services with Gartner, Inc., on behalf of AIM and Watershed, pursuant to the section of the code indicated here, for a term of 2 years with 2 one-year renewal options in an amount not to exceed $228,888. All work will be charged to and paid from, et cetera. And can we get a brief presentation on this, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Shook and honored members of the committee. My name is Alan Greenberg. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of Atlanta, the cybersecurity lead for the city. This resolution before you is to provide technical services for vendor research, advisory for both IT SCADA for Watershed, as well as cybersecurity.
Are there other departments that use another vendor to provide similar services?
There are other vendors, but not the same level of technical research and technical depth that's there. That's why we went with Gardner specifically for watershed, for being able to provide, since we're doing so many updates for the water systems, especially the automation piece, as well as cybersecurity.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll move approval. Second by Ms. Overstreet. If there's nothing else, let's open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
25R3010 is a resolution by Finance Exec authorizing the mayor's designee to execute a special procurement agreement, which number of which is indicated, managed security system provider, MSSP, with Data Prize Solutions, LLC, on behalf of AIM, Aviation, and Watershed, pursuant to the section of the city code indicated here for a term of 3 years, to exercise at the City of Atlanta's sole discretion with 2 one-year renewal options in an amount not to exceed $4,798,575. All contract work will be charged to and paid from, et cetera. At the administration's request, we're to hold this, correct? Okay, so I'll make that motion. Second by Bakhtiari. Let's open that vote on the motion to hold.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, you guys have it. That takes us to 25R3011. We need to bring forward a substitute. The caption appears to be different, so let me read that caption. This is a substitute resolution by Finance Exec authorizing the mayor as designee to exercise the third renewal option for a co-op agreement, number of which is indicated, citywide integrated security and video surveillance services with A, Convergent Technologies, LLC, B, GC&E Systems Group, Inc., and C, NetPlanner Systems, Inc., on behalf of DEEM and other departments listed herein, effective April 21st of this year through April 20th of next, in an amount not to exceed $4,508,490.51. And what does the substitute accomplish?
It reduces the amount by $40,000.
All right, substitute actually reduces the amount. Any questions or comments? Did we make a motion to bring forward the substitute? All right, the first and second has been made by Bakhtiari and Juan. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Motion by Juan, second by Bakhtiari to approve on substitute. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Right, you guys have it. 25R3012 is a resolution by Finance Exec authorizing the mayor's designee to execute the 7th Amendment to the agreement, number of which is indicated, ATL Cloud Implementation and Post-Implementation Support Services with Deloitte on behalf of DOF to add funding in an amount not to exceed blank. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from, et cetera. They have asked that this be held, so that's my motion. Second by Overstreet. Motion to hold. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the ayes have it. Item is held. 25R3013 is a resolution by Finance Exec authorizing the mayor's designee to execute financial advisor services agreement 1 with Ernst & Young Infrastructure Advisors, LLC, on behalf of Department of Finance for a term of 3 years with 2 one-year renewal options in an amount not to exceed $1.5 million. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from, et cetera. Mr. Knight.
Good afternoon again. Courtney Knight, Chief of Treasury, Debt and Investments. From time to time, we're presented with opportunities to finance capital improvements of the city through a public-private partnership. Right now, we're looking at a potential biosolids facility on behalf of the Department of Watershed Management. So we're engaging a financial advisor here to analyze whether entering into a public-private partnership is the best methodology to finance that facility, whether we should proceed as a P3, and then if we decided to go forward as a P3 to help us negotiate a contract and identify the private partner.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Knight? I'll move approval. Second by Juan. If there's nothing else, let's open that vote.
The vote is open.
Thank you. Okay, 25R3014, excuse me, is a resolution by Finance Exec authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute special procurement agreement, number of which is indicated, legal research services with West Publishing Corporation, doing business as Thomson Reuters, for the purchase of license subscriptions for Westlaw legal research and information services on behalf of Department of Law, pursuant to the code section indicated here, for a term of 3 years and an amount not to exceed $415,000. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from, et cetera.
Good afternoon. Ty White, Director of Legal Operations for the Department of Law. This is a resolution to enter into an agreement for our Westlaw Research online program subscription.
Motion to approve by Juan, which I will second. If there's nothing else, let's open that vote.
This needs to be amended.
Oh, we need to amend, yeah, we need to add the special procurement letter. So motion's been made and seconded. Thank you. Let's open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. The item's amended.
Amendment carries. I'll make a motion to approve as amended. Second by Mr. Amos. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, that takes us, I believe, to held papers. We do have two. Oh, I forgot about this, Jim. Let's take the other one first, and that'll be when we'll end it with the dreaded personnel paper. Let's go to 24R4611. This is a resolution by Shook authorizing the Commissioner of the Department of Watershed Management to adjust water sewer service charges on certain customer accounts in accordance with the City of Atlanta Code section indicated here in the amount of $50,347.86. I'll move to bring the substitute forward. Second by Juan. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. Would all members please vote? The vote is closed. Item substitute.
Motion to approve on substitute. I will second that. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right. And now the dreaded personnel paper, 24O1594. This is an ordinance by Finance Exec to amend the chapter and code sections indicated here so as to provide for certain position abolishments, creations, reclasses, class creations, above entry authorizations, employee position transfers, position funding allocation changes, and other personnel actions in line with the FY25 budget and for other purposes. And we need a substitute, so I'll move to bring the substitute forward. Second by Juan. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open. And that caption remains the same. The vote is closed.
The ayes have it. Substitutes before. Is this your first personnel paper presentation?
Yes, sir. And you said it was dreaded, so I'm going to try to liven it up a bit, I guess.
Congratulations,
Sorry.
Commissioner. I know you've got a lot to walk us through, so take it away.
All right. To Chair Shook, Vice Chair Juan, good afternoon. I'm Calvin Blackburn, Interim Commissioner for the Department of Human Resources, and it is my pleasure to present fiscal year 25 mid-year personnel paper. Start out with a little terminology there for you all so that you're aware of the terms we're speaking of. And I'll turn now to page 3. Overall, we had 567 total personnel actions. Cliff notes wise, 107 abolishment of positions and 160 position creations. So again, for total actions, including salary adjustments, position transfers, 567. Now I'm going to walk through, next slide, each of the various departments and their personnel actions.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, was that a question?
No.
Okay. Atlanta City Council, total of 11 actions. You should be advised that Atlanta City Council is establishing classification titles and pay ranges for City Council assistant positions. Incumbents will be assigned to the appropriate classifications based on their current compensation. So again, 11 total actions for Atlanta City Council. Next slide.
There's going to be a lot of questions on this, so let's, instead of moving on and waiting till the end, let's take these as they come. Ms. Overstreet?
Are we going to do our questions per section or
Well, I think we need to discuss this because this might require some discussion.
Yes.
I mean, I need to hear a little more background as to how we arrived at what's been presented.
Okay, sounds like we're on the same page. I did the whole book for a couple days, and this is the one where I have the most questions because I'm not sure why we're requesting this. I actually don't feel comfortable singling out our council offices. I do like the independence right now of each of our council offices. I'm not saying declassifying our staff and our team, but I don't think I want to put a GS on it or anything that I see on this page for my particular staff members.
Yes,
so is there a way, and I mean, I know we can discuss this later, but is there a way that I can make like an amendment to remove this portion so that I can get more information about why we're doing it, trying to see if it makes it better for City Council? I've looked at it and I don't see how that'll be better for me, for sure. And I want to just review it maybe with DHS.
Okay.
I don't mind. I just, and maybe perhaps we can have like a separate paper later or something. I just don't want to put this in with the totality of the rest of these personnel papers because I have way too many questions and concerns about changing the operations and parameters of my office, my personal office.
Thank you, Councilmember D.
Okay, I mean, so is there an answer for that? Our policy or law, can I make an amendment to a motion to amend to remove this portion? Oh, there we go. Santana. Kimson Wright.
Good afternoon, Finance Executive Committee, Chair Shook. Santana Gibson Wright, Atlanta City Council. This exercise was done in conjunction with the Department of Human Resources and the Atlanta City Council, working jointly with council members that sit on this committee. In essence, the thought and the hope was to bring some type of clarity and structure to our offices. Currently, all city council employees that work for the elected officials are titled either a city council assistant or a city council assistant senior. And the grade structure is it's open. You are allowed to hire whomever you desire at whatever salary you desire with whatever qualifications based on specifically how they will support your office. The proposal will allow, and I'm sorry, I should also state with that, even though their titles and their formal classifications are city council assistant or city council assistant senior, working titles can be anything from council intern, council office of the council person XYZ, chief of staff, constituent services manager, senior policy advisor, director of community engagement, chief policy officer, senior council assistant, operations manager. There are some admin assistants, deputy chiefs of staffs. It is incumbent upon what you prefer to see in your specific office.
Our individual office.
And that is the working title, yes.
Okay.
What this proposal does is it somewhat aligns us with other municipalities and jurisdictions that have established pay grades and structure there. So it would essentially establish a city council assistant with a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum salary and certain requirements and criteria for them, a city council liaison, a lead city council liaison, and a city council senior advisor. And it would not impact anyone that is currently here and in place, but going forward, anyone that you hire, they should meet the minimum qualifications of these particular the job structure proposal.
Yeah, I don't think I like that, y'all. I really don't. I think that us having independence as council members to construct our team however we want, with whomever we want, is important to me. And I certainly don't want to start, classifying. I'm not on board with that.
Okay. And just
Not at this time.
a point of clarity, you all still would be able to employ who you desired. However, the purpose is to establish a fair and equitable compensation structure, and also aimed at retaining and attracting qualified personnel and ensuring that we're also in compliance with FSLA.
Wouldn't that be incumbent upon the council member to make sure that they're hiring the best for their team for what they need for their constituents?
I cannot argue with that.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're doing.
Okay.
So, I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we pull this portion off to have further discussion, and, continue on so that we're not holding up anything else.
And just for clarification, that means that there would be an amendment to remove out of section 2, the classification title amendments and the creation classifications for all of these city council elected official.
That's my proposal, yes.
Okay, positions. Just want to make sure. I can ensure that the team has the necessary language if the body chooses to move forward with that amendment.
Yeah, do I have a second?
Restate, please.
I really just want to amend, just to remove the city council portion of this personnel paper, to make it a standalone, so that we can, dive into who would like to change their office structure to conform to this.
I'm going to hold off on making a second until we have more discussion. Mr. Juan is primarily responsible for bringing this to us and has spent a lot of time on it. And so if it's okay with you, I'll let him
It's fine.
explain, his rationale.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Councilmember Overstreet's questions on this. This has been a long gestation, and I agree. I will confess that I kind of the mastermind behind this from when I was finance chair. I think first and foremost, and I know Ms. Kempson Wright stressed this does not change anyone's flexibility to do whatever you need to do with your staffing. You can still use your same titles. What this does is create at least a little bit of structure that becomes consistent across the city with other departments and, levels and classifications and pay grades and all that. What was driving this is that because we end up having such a unique and a customized structure for each one of our individual offices, our staff ends up getting caught whenever there are salary, COLA adjustments. If there are other citywide initiatives that impact staff, our staff get left behind unless we take action to catch them up or make them whole, which we don't always do. So I want to underscore that, first of all. Second, it also, as Ms. Kempson Wright said, allows us to get consistency with other jurisdictions, as well as, it becomes challenging sometimes when we have team members that are saying, wait a minute, if I look at another jurisdiction or another department within the city, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, I have X, Y, or Z qualifications. It helps us not lose people to those departments. I mean, you see a lot of times when we will have folks post out of our departments because they can get better opportunities across the city. So I feel very strongly about this because I do think we should limit whenever we customize things just because we're city council. I feel like we need to kind of adhere to federal labor practices in terms of things like exempt, non-exempt status, in terms of salary requirements, part-time, full-time designations, and I feel like we haven't been doing that, and it sets us up for employment liability as well. Again, hang on, I'm not finished.
I do have a question,
though. I think, I would encourage, Ms. Kempson Wright to sit down again with every council member that has any questions and show you how your current structure fits into this and does not, without any sort of changes or major adjustments, and what it means going forward, rather than striking this whole thing out. I think we owe it to our council staff to provide this clarity for them. I also think as new council members come in and start hiring and building, if they can start plugging into this structure in the long term, we are protecting ourselves, protecting our employees, or our staff members. And again, I think just trying to drive us to a more kind of standardized professional and a federal employment law compliant perspective. So I understand the concerns around this. Change is always scary, but I don't think this is the kind of change that folks are thinking it is. Because again, it won't, as Ms. Kempson Wright, it doesn't impact who you have, how you have, when you have, where you have. At this point, it just provides a little more consistency with how the city as a whole, we look at and process and treat staff members. So that's kind of my explanation of why the genesis of this and why I do think it's important for us to move forward with it.
So as elected officials, just in general, do we have these requirements to be elected? No, we don't. And I truly feel that we are the best judgment of how to best staff. And she has, in all transparency, she has sat down with me and made sure that I understood this well. And this is probably not just about me. This is just about the fact that we are elected. Our positions are unique. We don't have these types of parameters, even in us being employed to represent the city. So I have angst in saying that I can only hire employees that are in this, that are for this and do that. And I certainly don't want to start labeling if they're mid and senior, and, I mean, if I did, I would do that anyway, because I have that capability now, because I'm the one that decides what's happening in my office. So I'm not feeling any of this.
Well, I think we just have a difference of opinion here.
I do. I think
Yeah,
so too.
I don't think necessarily, just the simple fact that we're elected gives us free license to not try and comport with federal employment law.
Oh, no, I don't
and-
think
And
anybody's-
structure, and kind of try and be consistent with what our municipality and our HR department administrations have been striving for. So that's my perspective on it, but I understand. And to the extent that there are specific examples of how your current staff, you can't fit that into this, I think that's worth discussing. But I don't believe that there are specific instances of that. So I think I can understand the hesitance to start putting bumper guards on this, but I just think it's in the best interest of what we do. So we'll see how this lands.
And if I may, I'm sorry, excuse me, just for clarity, there have not been any issues, just for the listening public, with any of your employees receiving COLAs with this administration. If there was a citywide COLA issued, no different than any other department, I'm responsible for reaching out and ensuring with finance and our payroll division that all of our employees are included. There have been issues in the past, but there have not been any since 2022. Also, DHR, when they put this proposal together for us, they actually looked at other municipalities to determine if there are any minimum, maximum salaries and grade ranges, and there are. They're not as many as what we are proposing, but the majority of them have a minimum and a maximum salary that is established, and it just gives you all that window. Whether the actual job descriptions, essential duties, requirements are the same or similar, or as robust as the structure that we are currently proposing, I can't attest to.
Here's what I would propose at this. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Spector.
I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents that this sounds like the perfect opportunity during this budget cycle to discuss allocating more funding to council offices so we can actually retain the staff and resources we need, since we are the most forward-facing office, and so we can properly do our jobs. So sounds like there needs to be an increase, similar to the executive.
Here's what I would suggest we do at this point. Let's move on to the other departments. That'll give us some time and space here to sort of huddle up, get our thoughts together. And I would ask Commissioner to, feel free to run your no huddle offense as you cycle through the rest of this. What might end up happening could be a motion to send forward without recommendation to provide more time to have these discussions. I'll just say for the record, I have angst.
So what I don't want to happen, I still have the floor, actually. What I don't want to happen is for me to say no to this whole book when I don't feel no to the book.
And your motion would be in order,
Yeah,
but it's got to pass.
I know, but yeah, I understand that.
I'm doing anything that's going to buy more time for further discussion, and I'll just share for the record, and as I've shared with the principal sponsor, my angst about this is rooted really in 2 realities. One, that I'm set in my ways, and 2, I'm curmudgeonly. And so...
You're what? I'm sorry?
I'm curmudgeonly, and I don't like change. I don't necessarily think that what we've had has been terribly broken beyond repair, but I'm leaving. So
Yeah,
this is
so
for y'all to sort through.
I don't mind change. I don't have turnover either in my office. All of us have degrees. I just don't know, why this, honestly. I don't like being told what needs to happen in my office.
Have I cut anybody else off in the last few minutes? All right, can we move on and try to get through the rest of this, and then we can come back to it? All right, Mr. Garman, take it away.
Thank you very much. Next slide. Atlanta Department of Transportation, 123 total actions. You should know the department is eliminating 88 unfunded positions. It has 21 position transfers designed to align resources more appropriately. And there are 14 reclassifications with or without incumbents. And this is also being done to align resources more appropriately within their designed area and allow resource gaps to be filled with existing vacancies. That's ADOT. Any questions before I move on?
Questions or comments? Ms. Hills?
So I guess I'll just ask for more details. I'll know from you or from Commissioner Cavanis about, this is out of all of the departments we have lined up in this document. By far, 88 abolitions are the highest in this entire document. And maybe we're trying to get rid of that 40+% vacancy rate, but I would just like, a short synopsis of both abolitions and the transfers, the 21 transfers. Then may have some more questions.
Sure, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Cavanis.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackburn. Solomon Cavanis, Atlanta Department of Transportation. So obviously, these are a high number of actions that are presented before you. What we've done in response to some of the comments we've heard during the initial presentation is make sure that we align our personnel and our mission, our personnel with our mission to address the priority hires and priority positions. What we found is over the 2 years since I've been here, we have not abolished many of the positions that are inconsistent with the organizational structure that we presented during our budget hearings. So this is an opportunity for us to make sure we take care of those roles that we have no intention of filling, but also get us back to where we need to be, which is 21% vacancy rate.
And so what about the 21 transfers? What do those consist of?
Yeah. So what you've heard over the last year or so is that we created a engineering office, and we've had to realign the department with many of our engineering and professional staff who are currently in the TIM group over to the engineering group. With that, there was some realignment into the Office of the Commissioner and throughout the department. So we've had to make some adjustments, and that number appears pretty high, but that is consistent with the reorganization.
And not now, but could I just get you send the committee a list, an itemized list of the 88 abolitions and what part of the department they fell under and their titles?
Yes.
Because, I understand, if you haven't done this in a while, maybe one of the reasons your vacancy rate is so high. But then again, the SLAs don't look that great, haven't looked that great either. So, if we're abolishing positions instead of filling them, we're going to make that vacancy rate look better, but are we going to address, the core problems that we get emails on many, many times a day? So if you could just give me that list of abolitions and the part of the department they are in, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hang on. Okay, so the city attorney, I know has to leave, and I believe she had some comments she wanted to make. City attorney, I know you have to leave. Did you want to add some comments to the city council part of this discussion?
Thank you very much, Committee Chairman Shook. I am available for the city council part of this just because an inquiry was made about the amendment. The amendment can be delete that particular section and y'all can vote it up or down. What I was trying to do, and I was asking your graces for, was to deal with law and any questions you might have, because I have to get to a press conference at 4:30. So I was just, that's what she was asking, but I don't know if she got it.
Oh, okay, I see. All right, thank you. All right, let's mush on with AIM.
I'm sorry, did you want me to move to law right now for their portion, or I want to make sure I understood? I thought that's what the city attorney
Do we
was
want to
asking.
do that, or do we want to just keep? All right, okay, let's take law then.
Does anyone have any questions? I don't think they're too controversial.
Yep. Thank you. For law, section 21, there are a total of 4 actions. These include reclassifications with incumbents from Director of Legal Operations to Deputy Chief, and there are 3 salary grade amendments to correct the classification and compensation study, or as a result of the classification and compensation study. So 4 actions. Any questions?
Questions for the commissioner or the city attorney? All right, there don't appear to be any. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, back to AIM.
All right. AIM, Atlanta Information Management, Section 4. Total of 5 actions for AIM. 1, position abolishment as a result of the position no longer being needed. 1, employee salary adjustment to comport with fair market value in relation to current duties. And 2, salary grade amendments to align classification per the classification and compensation study. Any questions?
Apparently not. Thank you.
No actions for audit? Any questions? Apparently, yes, ma'am.
I don't understand why more positions aren't being added to our audit team, because I would say that right now they are completely overwhelmed with how many audits we've requested. They do the best they can, and I do want to thank them for that, but it seems to me that they would need additional support.
Is someone here from audit to speak to that? Okay. Thank you, council member. No one's here from audit, but I'll look into that.
Perhaps adopting without recommendation?
Well, I mean, FY '26 is right around the corner.
Yep.
That's when we would address
Yeah,
that.
so I will, they're correct, that is a budget conversation, but I do want to flag, because for all of us, that office is in my opinion, in need of some serious support.
My recommendation is you go to the Department of Finance, because they are already starting the initial work on that budget.
I see you guys over there. I'll be coming.
Okay.
Thank you, council member. Next slide. Aviation, 116 actions. 74 of those are position creations, and these are being done solely to convert extra help with benefits to authorized positions. We have 16 position transfers designed to align resources in the appropriate cost center and to assure accurate alignment, and 26 reclassifications with and without incumbents. And again, these are to align current duties and responsibilities due to reorganization and restructuring of the division. Any questions about aviation? Seeing none. We'll turn-
I do, sorry, Commissioner. Currently, what is the title for the airport, like, what is the official title for the head of our airport?
I believe it's airport general manager. Am I correct?
Yeah, is there discussion on how we can change that? Because whoever's the head of the busiest airport in the world, I would think a more formal title would be befitting of that. And may I also ask what their current salary is?
That I wouldn't have. I'd have to get that for you, council member.
If you wouldn't mind, because I think that that's something that most of the council was interested in knowing. Given wanting to make sure that we're attracting the best talent in the world for the busiest airport in the world.
Yes, we'll follow up with you.
Thank you.
I've just gotten some information from my crack team. It appears that the compensation is $306,000.
Yeah, and I'll say.
Annually.
Yes. Now, I've complained to the Department of Finance and the administration. This is the world's busiest airport. We're very proud of it. We take it personally when there's a hiccup. And unless we want Salt Lake City's assistant deputy we have to significantly increase his salary. So I'll just put that out there.
And may I also follow up, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
and then Ms. Overstreet.
Yeah, echoing that, I've looked into this quite a bit. We are being outcompeted by areas of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all these places that are building, that have so much money, that are building state-of-the-art, world-best airports, and of course are attracting a lot of talent because of that. Given that we do have the busiest airport in the world, and frankly, we know the issues with the state, I don't think this is an area where we want to mess up. And so to that point, one, changing the title, because general manager does not seem like a title befitting the head of the busiest airport in the world. And two, again, echoing what Chair Shook said about increased salary and revisiting that and looking at competitive, because I've looked and it's falling short by quite a bit, in my opinion, based on the research I've done. So if we could also get feedback on finance from that, I know that we won't be able to get all that today, but I just wanted to flag as something I would love follow-up on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Overstreet.
I just want to be on the record stating that I believe that that position is woefully under budgeted, for sure. That salary is probably 300 times too low. But seriously, it is very, very low. And it certainly isn't even to the level of an international airport, let alone the busiest international airport. So we have a long way to go with that. Do you know if there's talks about changing it or anything that will happen soon? Do you know anything?
I'm not aware of any talks about changing it.
Okay.
Regarding either salary or the
Salary.
title. I haven't heard anything.
Got it. Well, I definitely have, I'm motivated to change it. If there's legislation that we need to put in, I'm happy to. Thank you. But nothing about the positions. I'm fine with this page.
Thank you, council member.
All right, if we're ready to move on, let's move on.
Next slide. Citizens Review Board, no actions. Any questions? Thank you. Seeing none, I'll move on. Next slide. City Planning. City Planning has a total of, City Planning has a total of 9 actions. 1 class title amendment to amend the building inspector to lead to inspector lead. 1 position creation to convert extra help to an authorized position. 2 position transfers to accurately reflect job duties and responsibilities. 2 reclassifications with incumbents. Again, this is based on aligning duties and responsibilities. And finally, 3 salary grade amendments to address salary compression and reflect equity adjustments. Those are the 9 actions for city planning. Any questions?
Nope.
One moment. Thank you. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. Yes, council member.
So, sorry, I'm going to comment on all these, but DCP, in my opinion, is one of the most important offices we have. So, and we're also talking about, they're entrusted with our housing, as well as our zoning and permitting. So, so I want to flag that we have, I'm actually surprised not to see positions added, given what we are attempting to do with the TPO, given the numbers on housing. And I would really, and given their budget, frankly, which I know will be a budget conversation, but if we could, I see Deputy Commissioner Sitterfall, do you happen to know how many, off the top of your head, how many staff members you have in all of DCP? Or is that, I know, a light question.
I'm sorry, I think we have that information.
Okay.
Your question again was the number of,
Staff members.
Staff members? I have here for city planning, I'm sorry, we had 274 filled, 94 vacant.
Okay. Yeah.
Full complement about 300 or so.
Okay, then Deputy Commissioner, I'll just follow up with you after this, but I did want to flag that. I do.
Well, we certainly appreciate you flagging that, Councilmember.
Do you want to speak it to the mic?
Janet D. Sitterfall, Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Department of City Planning. We certainly appreciate you flagging that for us, Councilmember Bakhtiari. If you'll also remember, we put forward a huge recruitment effort as part of our efforts to develop a separate work stream for affordable housing. So as part of that, we've really taken a lot of the staffing pressure off of the permitting side. We're still in the process of filling a lot of those positions, but as, of course, we fill those positions, we are taking some of those staffing pressures off. And as far as the TPO implications are concerned, those would probably be captured in our FY26 budget.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, yeah, let me just say from a thematic point here, I mean, members of this committee have been, I'll use the word warned by the CFO, that the budget that's going to be, we'll next be seeing is going to be unlike the ones we've seen over the last couple of years. So it's not going to be a budget task, that everyone gets another 10, 5, 100 people. This is going to be the first tough budget for some of us here. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. Shook. Next slide, please. Corrections. Total of 6 actions in corrections, all in position creation. These positions are being created to support day-to-day facility operations. This involves restructuring, organizing, and creating appropriate alignment with the detainee identification unit, the accreditation unit, and the administrative services division. 6 changes for corrections. Any questions? Thank you. Next slide. Customer service. Customer service has 11 total actions. The majority of those 9 are position creations to convert from existing extra help positions. 7 reclassifications with incumbents to reflect expanded duties and responsibilities. And finally, 2 salary grade adjustments to ensure parity across the roles. 11 actions overall for customer service. Questions?
I'm going to follow up with Commissioner Good, but I do know that we are now open till midnight, correct? So additional work for 311. And so
Good afternoon. Yes, that's correct. We closed at midnight, Monday through Friday.
thank you. So I just wanted to make sure, and again, I can follow up with you after. I just want to make sure that this is reflective of what you all need in order to effectively cover those additional hours.
Yes, that's correct. We looked at our data and just assessed where we were. And as it stands today, we are doing pretty good with what we have.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Same here.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. And I just wanted to correct something I said. I said 9 position creations. There were only 2, actually. So that's what's reflected there in the chart, 2 position creations for customer service. Any other questions about customer service before we move on? Thank you. DEEM, Enterprise Asset Management. There are a total of 20 actions for DEEM. 17, the overwhelming majority are position abolishments. These are positions that are being eliminated. And then there are 3 position transfers, people moving from one department or organization to another. 20 actions overall for DEEM. Any questions?
Is this just really cleanup or is it a structural change? I'm just concerned. I'm surprised to see abolishments when, we even just passed a GO bond today to throw even more money at DEEM and we still have moving Atlanta forward projects.
Yeah, I think it is cleanup. It's mainly, it's cleanup paper.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any questions? Next slide. Thank you, Chair. Shook. Ethics. Ethics Department, sorry to say that 2 times fast, has 1 action. This is a reclassification with an incumbent to a Director of Innovation position to improve operational efficiencies. 1 change for ethics. Any questions? Next slide. Executive offices, 39 changes. 30 of those are reclassifications. The other 4 are position funding allocations to update function activity, and we have 5 salary grade amendments to correct the classification and compensation study. 39 actions for executive offices. Any questions? Yes, Ms. Councilmember Bakhtiari.
It is, well, I understand the need for the executive office. It just seems that this is taking up a lot of our budget, and this is setting up a lot of people for raises when we have other departments that need additional funding. So if you could just kind of explain, because my understanding is when we do a reclassification with incumbent, additional salary grades may be rising.
Yeah, I think, Councilmember, and I'm sorry, Theo Pace, Deputy Chief of Staff, Office of the Mayor, if you look at the reclassifications without incumbents, some of those are going to a class lower, so this is actually overall a cost savings to the office.
Okay, I'll follow up with you with additional questions, Mr. Pace. Deputy Director Pace, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pace. Any other questions concerning executive offices? Thank you, seeing none. Next slide. Finance. Finance reports 12 personnel actions total. The department has identified 12 personnel changes to create consistency amongst similar titles and/or to correct or establish job levels that permit advancement and reclassifying to better align with the department's expansion and increase in productivity. There were also 5 salary grade adjustments, and this was done again to correct the classification and compensation study. 12 changes for finance. Questions? Next slide. Fire. Fire has 10 changes, 4 funding allocations to align positions to the correct fund, and 6 reclassifications with or without incumbent to reflect the duties, the appropriate duties and responsibilities. So 10 changes for fire. Any questions? Seeing none. Next slide, grants and community development. Grants has 6 changes, 6 actions rather, I should say, I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking, 6 actions, all related to creating positions. These position creations were needed due to promotions and new federal funding allocations. The department has obtained 2 HUD competitive grant allocations on the city's behalf. Those grants mandate additional staff assigned specifically to the grants. All requested positions will be charged to the federal grant funding. Any questions concerning grants? Seeing none, next slide, please. Human Resources, 38 actions, 4 class title amendments to adjust titles to align with current organization and industry standards, 4 position creations to convert extra help into authorized positions, 6 funding allocations to ensure appropriate funding is in alignment, 18 reclassifications to convert unutilized vacant positions for extra help positions, and finally 6 salary grade amendments to correct classification and compensation study. 38 in HR. Seeing no questions, next, yes, I see the hand to keep going. Inspector General, 4 personnel actions. These were all salary grade amendments to ensure equity at the level of responsibility and tasks as assigned to those roles. 4 for Inspector General. Any questions? Seeing none. Judicial agencies, 2 actions for judicial agencies. These were both reclassifications without incumbent for proper alignment. 2 personnel actions for judicial agencies. Any questions? Councilmember Bakhtiari, you... I've missed you the last few pages, so I thought I'd ask.
I'm just going to call out that we have a serious backlog of the municipal courts, and this is something I'd also like to flag to visit because that is also holding up a lot of the work that we can do as a council that a lot of people are not aware of. So if we could also just send forth just some staffing levels, and I know I'm making a lot of comments. It's just an opportunity to learn, to see where we are in each department. So I know that these aren't all going to be what, we have a limited budget, but I would just like to learn more about the choices behind this, if you wouldn't mind. Not now, but you can send me.
Sure, happy to do that. We've been working closely.
Chairman Shook might kill me if I keep you any longer. Thank you.
Happy to do that, Councilmember. Thank you. Any other questions for judicial agencies before we move on? Seeing none, labor. Next slide. Labor has 4 actions. These are all reclassifications without incumbents, again, to align resources more properly and appropriately. 4 actions for labor. Any questions? Seeing none. Law Department, we've already discussed. Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation has 38 personnel actions. These are being done to First of all, there are 21 positions being created for additional support with Phase 1 park control. There are 11 reclassifications with or without incumbent to align positions with actual duties in the new classification and compensation study, and 5 salary grade amendments to align resources more properly. There was also a change made to correct a typographical inconsistency in one of the classification titles. So 38 changes or actions, if you will. Any questions regarding Parks and Rec? Seeing none, I'll turn to the police. 12 total actions, and these are all these are position creations, 12 position creations, and these are being done based on operational needs. 12 for APD. Any questions? Seeing none. Procurement. Procurement has 11 actions. 5 are position creations to better support the department's goals in its restructuring. And then there are 4 for reclassifications with incumbent to align with department restructure. And it looks like we have a class title amendment as well. So 11 actions, and a salary grade amendment as well. 11 actions for procurement.
Is the new interim procurement chief here?
Yes, she is. Ms. Houston?
Yeah, I'm just simply calling up here to put a name with a face and say hello and good luck.
Thank you. I need that last part for sure. Thank you so much, Councilmember Shook. I look forward to meeting you all. My office is setting up meetings to meet with you guys, hopefully as soon as next week. I just started on last Tuesday, so we are getting there. But very nice to meet you guys. I look forward to speaking with you in person. Chandra Houston, Interim Chief Procurement Officer. I'll get used to that.
And that's the source of your legal expertise, correct? Is in
Yes.
this, okay.
Yes, I have supported procurement since I got here in late 2019. It's been my baby from a law perspective, and so I definitely know what they do, and I believe I have some ideas on how it should be done.
All right. Look forward to working with you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Houston. Next slide. Public Defender, no actions. Any questions? Next slide. Public Works. Public Works reports 17 personnel actions, 5 classification title amendments to remove the shift differential, 5 funding allocations for better alignment of resources to departmental needs, and 7 reclassifications with or without incumbent to align position titles appropriately due to changes in job duties and responsibilities. 17 personnel actions for Public Works. Any questions?
Go ahead.
Oh, yes, sir. Next slide. Solicitor, 3 actions. These are reclassifications with incumbents to better align the duties and responsibilities with that of the mission and objective of the Office of the Solicitor. So these are 3 reclassifications with incumbent. Any questions for solicitor?
Nope.
Next, Watershed. Watershed reports 75 personnel actions. These include 17 class title amendments to add the shift differential identifier, 25 position creations to improve overall operational efficiency, 5 position transfers, and 27 reclassifications with or without incumbent to accurately reflect job duties and to attract and retain the appropriate candidates. 75 actions for Watershed. Any questions?
Questions about Watershed? Apparently not.
And finally, I'm still available for additional questions.
All right, thank you. Well done, Commissioner. My questions and concerns about the personal paper are typically much more thematic and less about, how many blues the Department of Widgets has compared to how many reds and how many greens and how many yellows. It is the administration's job to run the city. And this is budget neutral, right, Mr. Moses?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't think it's budget neutral, but it doesn't increase the budget by.
Well, it's always held out as being budget neutral, but I confess, I always hear that with some skepticism. All right, now, so we're back with what we're going to do here in terms of the city council section. There appear to be a couple options. We can send this forward, without rec to give people time to discuss it. We can remove, we can send the city council portion forward by itself with no recommendation and pass the rest of it. Ms. Collier-Overstreet, what is your pleasure?
I appear to be the only one that has a problem with this, to be honest. And I'm going to have one. I'm going to have a problem with it. So, I mean, I don't see where that leaves any other alternative but to just leave it where it is. And I just have to vote no. I mean, in order to move anything out of a committee, you would have to have a second for an amendment. And everybody seems fine. I just don't agree. And I'm fine with being the only one.
Well, if it gets approved and sent there and you vote no, then it's not going to be on the consent agenda, and there would be another bite at the apple. Even if it was unanimous and went there, it could always be, pulled off consent, for renewed discussion.
Yeah, I don't mind being the only one that doesn't agree.
I'm sorry, could you repeat? I didn't hear that.
I don't mind being the only one that doesn't agree. I'm fine with that.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve on substitute. Second by Juan. Further discussion. Let's open that vote.
The vote is open.
Vote is open.
The vote is closed. 5 yeas and 1 nay.
5 yeas, 1 nay. The ayes have it, and we'll take this up again on Tuesday. Do we have any other business?
No.
Mr. Evans says no. Any announcements?
Wanted to state this really quickly because I didn't get to yesterday during CDHS, but I wanted this to at least go on record this week, that somebody from the continuum of care community or the administration was supposed to report back yesterday about our summer pit count, which was legislation that passed. For those who don't know, that is doing a count on the homeless population in the summer. Right now, we do it in the winter every other year as required by HUD. The city goes above and beyond by doing it every year, and this is simply an ask for us to switch the non-HUD required years to summer pit counts. So again, if I will be emailing COC and the administration about having them come to do a report at CDHS ASAP, because this is an opportunity to more accurately count our unsheltered population so we can better take care of them. So I just wanted to name that. I will be sending out an email today. So thank you.
Thank you. We're adjourned.